everybody ready. Here we go. Clear. Ready. Now, Tom?
Yeah!
You got to be real out of breath.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Lieutenant, what are you doing here? Lieutenant Dan, I guess we cut.
Working on the water is always hard. It looks so easy, but there's nothing harder than trying to make a movie anywhere near boats or water, because everything moves and everything's floating and the sun's moving and the wind and the currents and all those things. So we had this whole flotilla of boats and barges.
Well, Bob comes up with these things, the ways of doing it. It was beyond my comprehension. You know, I never think you take a barge out there and drop, leave it there and then steer it around with this tugboat. It looked to me like one of the most complicated. I didn't think it was going to work. But there's no other way to control everything that Bob had to control, because you're out there with multiple cameras and VistaVision and all that stuff. But it was, it was summertime. It was South Carolina. The water was warm, and it was a beautiful, all the shrimp you could eat. Not that you'd want to after a while.
It's like, what? And then run back to the wheel, then run back and like kind of do some steering and run back and talk to him and back.
All right, I got a feeling they're over there. Where? Left, take a left.
Okay!
No, left. I said left. Jesus.
Okay!
Good.
Which one?
Left. No.
Sorry!
Very nice.
You see him?
Sorry,
Where
guys.
are they?
Yeah.
Now, Bob, my energy.
Bob,
What?
We just start creeping in.
Yeah, we can.
and action. I got a feeling the shrimp are over there. So take a left. And Tom.
What? Wait, what?
Get on the wheel and take a left. Left. What the hell are you doing? Take a left. I said left.
They're out there.
That's where we're gonna find the shrimp, my boy. That's where we'll find him.
I love Bob. He knows his stuff. Funny as shit. And one day they were rigging me up in the thing up there, and I turned to Bob and I said, because I have a lot of different rigs with my legs and different things. I turned to Bob and I said, how many rigs can one man withstand? And he goes, oh, this is nothing. Meryl Streep had to act with a blue sock over her head.
Howdy, Tom. What's the drill? How you doing? Good.
I much prefer to be on location than shooting in Hollywood.
What a cute little church. Is this a great little church? Huh?
You're very focused on the work. You're in a strange place, so you don't really have a lot of distractions.
Hey, Leslie, how old is this church? Didn't we find out?
Pre-Civil War, because there's the
Pre-Civil
blood
War.
of the injured soldiers under the floor here.
See that?
You get to experience local color of where you are, and there's a lot of times that spills into the movie.
The tape starts singing this. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's tableland. Okay, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And let's roll sound and playback.
It was pretty powerful stuff standing in the midst of all them singing along. They're a huge commodity. They're a massively talented group of people that do a lot of dates.
Cut. Good. Very nice. Prince.
Hate it when it gets this hot. Look, my jello mold is all melted. Have you seen Forrest?
No.
You, Doctor, eating up all my sweets. Now stop that.
When we arrived at Oak Alley, there wasn't a home. That was a set that we built. But we took a look at this, and it was so much more iconic of the South than any town or any other fixture that you could imagine. I mean, these 100-year and older oak trees that were draping this road leading to this former home. And so we designed this beautiful, stately boarding house. When I brought Sally Field out there for the first time, she took a look and said, "My, what a beautiful place." And I said, "Yeah, we just finished building it." And she said, "You mean this place isn't real?"
That's showbiz for you. I thought it had been there for a zillion years myself, but evidently the house that was there right on that spot had burnt down and no one had built it back. And so they built it back.
Now stop that. Forrest! It's nice to see you again. We're good to each other.
Say good. Sal.
There's a hole in the dialogue.
Yeah, no, there's a hole in the, I don't get, see, this is great, and you put it down, and we see the flag, and you gotta get, you gotta get moving out, see?
You gotta get out. All right, I will.
Okay.
I'll get out.
So whatever, so you can meet her sooner.
All right.
Okay?
All right.
Great, thanks.
Forrest!
Okay, copy that.
Get your chin down, Field.
That's good though, Sal, good. Good. Very nice. All right, we're moving on. Well, I don't know, what do you guys think?
I've got
There, that's good. Great. Now, you know what's good, Tom, is if you, you kind of go, I've got a pain here, because then I'll see that. I'll see that action.
Oh, I see, okay.
But even though I guess it's got to be the other place, doesn't it? No, I don't see that at all. Yeah, just that. That's good. If you just do that. Good. Yeah.
You guys want to relax or stay there?
Did we put this log here, or was it always here?
And there are 100 years.
100 years. Oh, because I think it's loaded with any number of
100 years
things.
of it wasn't there a week ago.
It'll eat you alive.
Just like the house. You guys want to go in there?
And action.
I'm sorry, let's cut.
Cut right away, once again.
Yeah, please.
And action, Sally.
Aren't you going to eat, Forrest?
Mama, what's it mean when you got a pain, but you didn't get hurt?
A pain? Where?
Here. Something broke.
Oh. You come back safe to me. Do you hear me?
Cut.
Very nice. Let's go home. Very nice. Beautiful.
Yeah, live up to this.
Well, I thought it'd be inspiring. Great stuff. Good. Sally, thank you.
That's fun,
Great.
Sal.
Yeah.
That's our first mom and together. That is so sad.
It's a sad scene.
Beautiful.
Beautiful scene.
So Vance, I went up and focused with me.
What's that look like, Don't follow. And it would be dangerous.
When we based ourselves in Beaufort, South Carolina, we discovered that there were a lot of outlying islands in the area that all had features that resembled different terrain in Vietnam. When we were staging a gigantic scene where Forrest was saving Bubba was on Fripp Island, which is the furthest outlying island in this island chain.
Michael, let's get on there again so we can get this set. Okay, Tom.
What has to happen is Forrest has to go back and find his second best good friend, and that's Bubba.
Pants are gonna fall down in the scene. Hold on.
And last time he goes in to keep looking for Bubba, he knows that they're going to napalm the whole thing.
Yeah, they might go. Oh, nice touch. For a minute. See how this works. Right, baby?
Come on now. So technically, I had to carry Michael T., which is no easy feat, so they helped me out with some complicated rigging and monofilament lines and body harnesses and things like that.
I can float this end over.
Tom Hanks is a nut, man. Tom is crazy. Tom is quiet, and then all of a sudden he'll just blah! Just break out and just start doing this shtick.
The name of that movie is Peter Motherfucker Pan.
Peter the Brother Pan. Very careful. A camera speed. Speed. C speed. Speed. Four camera. Come and mark. Clear. Set. Action.
The first time we went through, I mean, Tom was running and it looked like, you know, Bubba was sort of floating on his own like this sort of light feathery sack.
He's way high.
Oh, he's way high.
Yes, it's all screwed up. Wait a minute, guys. He's like 2.5 feet too high.
Yeah.
And then the next time we added a little more weight, and then Tom was barely able to even run because he had so much weight that he was, you know, carrying. But we got it right eventually.
Clear. And action. Action.
And cut. Yeah. Print it. That's the one. Let's blow it.
So we need to check the gates.
So, Bob,
Yes.
I should then put
How we're gonna blow this right now. So Cam, he wants to.
It's really right at the ground. A lot of people here. I just want everybody to be able to count for everybody else. So
No. Also, they're not to squirt the camera.
and definitely not squirt the camera unless they're on fire. No.
Okay.
No, we won't let them in either.
They're not on fire.
When the moment came that it actually went up in flames, just with me just a few steps in front of it. I had to be very. I couldn't misstep once, otherwise, I would have been killed, because the gas flames were just a few feet. Actually, the napalm went off, and I was asleep in my trailer, actually, after a long lunch. But the way it looks is very, very dicey stuff, and I don't think I'm going to do my own stunts after this movie is over. I think I'll let somebody else do it for me.
This will be a great position. All right, so Dale, if you were marching out of this marsh,
Yes, sir.
through this tree opening, how would these guys be walking?
They'd be in a wedge.
Well, that's great. Let's just wedge, but let's just have the point in front of Forrest and Bubba, and we're wedging out, but it's just not as wide as you would do in. It's a wedge that's a little more narrow. Right.
The thing that we never ever wanted to do in any of this movie was just do that kind of tabloid pastiche version of whatever it is that we were doing. Because you don't want to get in a position where you know, you're doing something that is just so incredibly wrong that it wouldn't happen. That you're just so far off the base of any realism that you're kind of like you're doing some cheesy World War II movie on the back lot at MGM. You know, we didn't want to do that. We had Captain Dale Dye, who was probably the premier Vietnam advisor.
We're gonna make a wedge, folks. Alpha's here, Bravo's here.
I'm playing a lieutenant in a platoon. I don't come from a military background at all. I wasn't in the service. So what we did was we went out to the jungle and we lived out there for 3 days, which is short by comparison to some of the other films that Dale has done. Platoon, I think he took them out to the Philippines for 3 weeks.
The point man is Zorro, right? When Zorro moves, you'll see him. That's about all you'll see. That's it. Move when Zorro does.
I'll go get my line.
Yeah, go take your
I'll get my line from Vic.
The script called for a whole variety of different reigns in Vietnam that were listed off almost in the same way that Bubba listed off all the ways you cook shrimp. You know, doing rain that, you know, is running parallel to the ground is like nearly impossible. I mean, how do you get enough wind power to drive this rain just literally horizontal to the ground?
He was telling me about it. Oh, it's going great. We got this jet engine. And I tried to imagine what that would be like. And I thought, well, it's probably like an engine of a jet stuck on what, like a trailer? Well, sure enough, that's exactly what it is. They just kind of pointed it at us, fired it up, and blew kerosene exhaust on us. It's not pleasant, I'll tell you that right now, but man, that wind does blow.
You gotta do it again. Take it back. Zach, line up. Well, shit. Well, for some reason, what was that Ritter doing on? Was there a Ritter on Tom that whole time?
Yes.
Well, nothing. Playback, Ian.
Maybe we should do.
Let's do one. Let's do one more and just stay right on Tom. Whatever he has to do. Okay. Yes, please. One more once. That was good. Tom.
You know, once the movie starts rolling, you don't want to come back here. You know, once you establish, I mean, so that's why I felt that we'll come back more often in the beginning.
Yes, and then eventually we'll never come back here again. You know?
Right. Well, it was always part of the script that Forrest was relating the story to strangers on this bus bench. The screenplay actually was scripted in very few places, but I talked with Tom about it early on. I said, after we establish this character about midway through production, I think we should go and we should shoot you performing all of what would end up in the film being narration on camera.
Usually, you know, you just take it for granted that a vast majority of the movie is going to be voiceover and you'll be doing it later. And Bob's idea to shoot it, he said, oh, I think we got to shoot it all. We got to be there. We really got to shoot it. So, and I thought, why? I mean, we're just going to have to redo it. But if we don't have to redo it, then we have it there in real time, in the real place, and you know, and it plays out in real scenes.
That's better.
Now, what are we doing with these cue cards? Where are they going to be for Tom?
Let's just have one.
I always knew that we'd start off with those cards, and by the time we'd rehearsed it enough, I'd know it at a pop. But it was just reams and reams and reams and reams of pages of dialogue. but they were all so connected with images that we had already filmed or images that we had talked about so much that I hardly even needed them. By the time the cameras were rolling, I didn't even look at them.
Hanging everyone, it's fine. Okay, ready to go?
And background action. And action, Tom.
When I was born, my mama named me Forrest Gump.
Hold on.
And action.
When I was born, my mama named me Forrest because of a hero. Okay, because of some general.
And action.
When I was born, my mama named me Forrest because of some general who was a hero in the Civil War. Mama said we was kin to the general's family some ways, and he was a great man, she said, except he started up the Ku Klux Klan, Grand Exalted Pish Pash, or whatever they called himself. Anyways, this one time they was out running around in their sheets, in their underwear, hanging everyone in sight. The general's horse tripped or something. The general fell into a bunch of mud. They must have mistaken the general for somebody else because the confusion and all, it was dark out, and seeing how he was covered in mud, they hung him too. Anyway, that's how I got my name, Forrest Gump.
And cut.
Hey, now, where do you want, the looks, where do you want them? I mean, you know,
What's on your mind?
you want it like totally conversational where I'm going all over like that, or do you want me to like lock into it, you know, or just find it? Because I mean, that was just everywhere. I don't have to be everywhere.
I think it should be two places. I think it should be I think it should be out there. It should be the reminiscing angle, which is that, and then the conversation.
Can I go this side of this?
Of course you can.
Okay, I can go anywhere. All right.
Of course.
I was like just kind of, especially late in the schedule the way it was, I was just, it's the last thing I thought I would want to do. By the time we got to doing it, it was the most fun that I'd had on the movie because you literally get to spin this kind of yarn. So it's not just me recording the information, but me relaying the story, which is a big, big difference.
From that day on, if I was going anywhere, I was running.
And cut. Great. Okay, action, Tom. Backhand, power. Back and forth, Valentino.
As great an actor as Tom Hanks is, he's a really good ping pong player, but he's not as good as what Forrest has to become.
More power, Tom.
So we did that using movie magic. You have the actors mime playing ping pong, and then you put the ball in later optically.
And cut. Try it again at 22 frames.
Of course, in typical movie fashion, we hire the greatest ping pong player in the world to be his opponent. Of course, this guy's never played without a ball before. He's out. He's out.
He's like a world-class ping pong player, and of course, to ask him to pretend to play ping pong is one of the hard. He had such a tough time.
If Valentino, when I crank it up, if he gets out of sync, why don't you just be still until he gets in?
Okay.
And then pick it up after that.
Okay.
And then, because what we couldn't do, you can't have both characters swinging at the same time. So we had to have a metronome so that each character would know when to strike the ball. And then we kept speeding it up and speeding it up. And it wasn't that easy.
I tell you, it was exhausting playing that ping pong game. It was, it was very tough. I'd rather actually play ping pong with a regular ball. That was tough work.
Beginning to see it though, Bob. I'm beginning to see the ball.
Let me say this, being an idiot is no box of chocolates. People laugh and lose patience, treat you shabby. Now, the sales folks supposed to be kind to the afflicted, but let me tell you, it ain't always that way. Even so, I got no complaints because I reckon I done live a pretty interesting life, so to speak.
Do you want a chocolate? I could eat about 1.5 million of these. My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
I've often thought that adaptation was misunderstood, or as President Bush used to say, misunderestimated. It's something that requires, I would say, more than craft, actual art. And it's sometimes so hard that it's harder than actual creation. I mean, if you think about what would it be like if someone gave you a pencil and said, hit a home run, you'd be better off inventing a whole new game. And adaptation is often like that.
It would have been very difficult to make Forrest Gump into a movie just like the book. And a lot of people who go to movies expect the movie to be just like the book, and some are disappointed and some aren't. You take them each for what it is and enjoy it. That's what it's there for.
It's now a very important part of the publishing industry to have a kind of partnership with the movie industry. As the publishing and journalism model becomes increasingly too feeble to stand on its own, movie money is providing, sort of the extra leg on the three-legged chair. The studios and even the agencies have divisions that are set up basically to spy out what's coming. By the time you and I, John Q. Public, find out about a book and read the reviews of the New York Times Book Review and say, hey, this sounds good, it's probably long been bought as a movie and may even be heading on its way to production. And as we know, that's exactly what happened with Forrest Gump.
It was 23 years ago. I was having a lunch with my father, and he began to reminisce in his childhood about in his neighborhood there was a young boy who was what then was called retarded. And the kids in the neighborhood would chase him and call him names and throw sticks at him and tease him just like kids will do, until one day this young boy's mother bought a piano, and within a day, gorgeous piano music was wafting out of the windows. So I got back that afternoon and thought, this may be a scene somewhere in a book that I may be able to use. I'm gonna make some notes. And by midnight that night, I had written the first chapter of Forrest Gump. This is an advanced reading copy, which is what they sent out to critics. It's a galley proof, what they call it, bound galleys.
I met Forrest when I read The Galleys of Winston Groom's novel. And this was a story that I felt right away it had to be told.
My agent had sent it out to some people in various parts of California. It wound up in the hands of Wendy Finerman and Steve Tisch, who carried it to Warner Brothers, and they said, everybody, let's do it.
It may have been really just based on one thing, the central idea. It's called high concept. High concept is a movie that you can pitch basically in one sentence. For instance, the movie Big was considered a high concept. A grown-up turns into a 13-year-old or whatever age he was. Done. Got it. See the movie. The high concept of Forrest Gump was, a mentally challenged man who gets himself into these extraordinary situations on a very high level. One sentence.
So everybody was all excited about it, and they asked me to write the screenplay, and I wrote one version. They wanted revisions. I've made notes in here, I see, cut to, and so on. Narration over, montage, struck out paragraphs of scenes. And
Winston did a great job. What kind of happened, though, was Winston, since it was his own novel, really stuck close to the novel. And when you really look at the movie and you compare it to the novel, you really see the changes that need to be made.
I was trying to write it, like all writers will, to the book. Because I thought, well, people like the book, why change it? This thing was tremendous that Eric Roth wrote. I mean, I was just stunned. But they had in between Eric's version and my version, I don't know how many writers.
The screenwriter is both the indispensable element in movie making and the most dispensable, especially in the eyes of the studio. For one simple reason, really, he's dispensable because he's the only one who can be fired before production. You know, nothing happens before the screenwriter is finished. So you can go through a few of them and you know, actually, this word fired is very invidious and makes people sort of go, fired, geez, he must have done something terrible. If a screenwriter is the first person hired to do something by a studio, he will be fired because they can, because they don't know what they want. And they can look at what the screenwriter did and say, well, this is great, but you know, if we threw some money at someone else, they might give us something else. And then we could put them together and get a third screenwriter on and a fourth screenwriter to do the dialogue. And that's how the system has worked for some time.
Everybody gets fired. They fired Hemingway, for heaven's sake. They fired Faulkner, fired Wolfe and Fitzgerald. It just means they pay you more money the next time.
By the time we were on our third draft of Forrest Gump, we were kind of outwritten. I will tell you a couple other funny anecdotes that had happened along the process. Somebody had came and pitched a project to me called Rain Man. And I said, that's a good idea, but I can't do 2 movies about, you know, a limited person. 2 years later, Rain Man wins the Academy Award. At times it took wind out of my sails, and at times it definitely, you know, put our project in the back burner at the studio. Cut to 7 years later. Project is nowhere at Warner Brothers. We've been through many, many writers, many drafts, a couple interested directors, a couple interested stars. And by now, we realized that we needed to start anew in the development of a script. And simultaneous to that, Tom Hanks and Eric Roth and I had been working on a project called The Postman. And the three of us really had a great working relationship.
Warner Brothers at that time had no interest in the book with or without me and Tom, you know. So they'd put in a turnaround, and Wendy went over. We took it over to Paramount, and I went and I pitched it to Brandon Tartikoff.
Tom and Eric came over to my office, and we sat in the office, and we had Chinese food. Figured, like, well, what are we going to pitch? What are we going to do? And, like, you know, we started talking about Forrest, started talking about this. And clearly, as we're driving over to the studio, we really didn't have a pitch. But, like, right beforehand, I turned to Tom and just said, you know, you were a comedian, you know, just do something. Like, you know, just do something.
I know he claims he doesn't remember this, which I find funny because he was absolutely there helping kind of to pitch the thing. And he could do it in voices, and, you know, it was like just the idea of a guy sitting on a bench, and we told the story.
Tom literally sat down and started describing a feather floating, a man sitting on a bench, started quoting some of the Forrest lines, and we were maybe no more into 5 minutes of the so-called non-pitch. And Brandon Tartikoff says, oh my God, I love that. When can I have it? When can we start? And we all, like, looked at each other and, you know, were elated and, you know, ran out of the room. Couldn't believe it. I mean, that doesn't happen in Hollywood.
When you're a journalist covering the movie business, what you think is the hardest thing is, well, you know, you go make a movie, and what's hard is making it really, really good and artistic and brilliant and fun and entertaining. What's really hard, though, is getting it made at all. That's what you find out, especially in the Hollywood studio system. For one thing, it's a very expensive proposition. And so what they're always going to try to do is minimize risk. You know, are you making the right decision right now? Is this a safe bet?
When one attaches one of these movie stars with a track record to someone like Tom Hanks, it is a safer bet for these studios. However, the story was pretty out there. So there was a lot of reservation on the studio about the budget.
Congratulations. How does it feel being All-American?
It also entailed a lot of visual effects and special effects that you really could not even describe how they were going to be accomplished other than Bob just saying, well, you know, there are these people up at ILM and they do this stuff and, you know, we'll just, you know, we'll green screen this and, you know, we'll get a clip and we'll put them in there.
I believe he said he had to go pee.
At that point, the only time they had mixed real walking and talking actors in past footage were commercials. So Tom helped us, letting them know that we had a decent shot at being a box office hit, but we had a lot of risk against us.
On a novel and is therefore an adaptation. And I think it's a very skillful adaptation. If you look at the difference between the screenplay of Forrest Gump and the novel, I mean, the screenplay is full of invention, is really, it's a very, very different work, and it really comes out of Eric Roth.
It was actually very freeing because no one was going to really do it. It had been dead for like 9 years before I came onto it. I just felt the permission to start from scratch. The Feather was a combination of Garp, the bouncing baby, and Coen brothers always used something rolling. One in particular was a hat in Miller's Crossing. And I felt it was sort of an interesting idea of the sort of destiny, where's things gonna take you? In other words, it's floating on a breeze, and it can land anywhere. I have, oddly, not particularly high regard for the screenplay. I mean, I don't think it's a great art form. I think it's a great craft. And I'm good at it. I think you have to be artful at it, but it's such a bastardized concoction. You really don't have much prose in it. You can use dots and dashes. It's a shorthand of a kind that gives sort of the impetus to what's going to happen next, and it's totally useless, obviously, if it's not made into a film, I think. Screenplays that maybe are literature. I would say The Second Godfather. I've read Citizen Kane. I think it's close. Chinatown would be one, I think. Not very many, though. I think you'd find very few. But that doesn't mean movies aren't an art form, but it's a much more collaborative form.
The novel, the art of the novel doesn't really have rules. And I would like to dream that the art of the screenplay doesn't either, but it's not true, especially in the studio system. I mean, French movies and Chinese movies, maybe they're more rule-free. The structures that exist now in the Hollywood studio movies are kind of determined by experience and even by all these sort of screenwriting classes, and which, whether screenwriters believe in them or attend them or not, are universally attended by studio executives. And the rules are there for a reason. They are conventions that work. I mean, for instance, maybe the most well-known one is the three-act structure. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. A movie has a first act which sets things up, and then at a certain point, and it's usually within 20, 25 pages, there's a turn that sets things into motion in the second act. The second act is the complications, the wild things that happen, the things that make up the bulk of the movie. The third act, finally there's a peak or a trough, something that makes it necessary to go into the big climax and the resolution.
I think what Eric did really brilliantly was, rather than tell it a typical three-act movie where you begin in the very beginning, if you remember, you meet Forrest Gump at the point where he's going to go find Jenny with the letter and find out that he has a son. And he is almost at the end of the movie. And what you do is you flash back to his story and you keep on then coming almost to present. But you don't come to present until the beginning of the third act.
Now, you wouldn't believe it if I told you, but I could run like the wind blows.
That structure, you were able to kind of believe his journey because you really knew these wild things that he had done were true because you're seeing the character as he is today.
I think you need to believe it's real. If you're not going to believe it's real, it's hard to then sort of have any real emotion.
Who in the hell is that?
I don't even care what you're doing, even the most farcical comedy, where if you can maintain some grounded reality to it, I think there's a level of truth and believability to it that makes it a better movie.
In a certain way, the book belongs to a family of books that pursue a kind of comic, dark satire, and that begins really earlier than the period that Forrest Gump appears in. It's really an outgrowth of the 60s, and Kurt Vonnegut, A Confederacy of Dunces comes later, but it partakes of the same tradition.
Basically, it's a farce, which I think is one reason I got fired off the screenplay, because I was writing it as a farce, and you know, about the only people that can do farce is theater, is the French, but the American don't like farce.
I think people would be surprised to find out that during the latter half of the novel by Winston Groom of Forrest Gump, Forrest befriends an orangutan that he met in the jungle. It's very sort of any which way but loose. And that orangutan is a character throughout the rest of the book and sort of accompanies Forrest everywhere. He has an encounter with Raquel Welch. He's briefly in the movie business. They're doing a remake of The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Jenny marries someone else in the book. She doesn't marry Forrest. She doesn't die of AIDS. However, the movie, Forrest has a child, and the child is normal and begins to replicate Forrest's experience by getting on the same school bus, and that provides this lovely structure that feels very satisfying. In the book, Forrest winds up living on the street with Lieutenant Dan playing music with his orangutan. When I was in journalism, I once interviewed Philip Roth, and I asked him, perhaps foolishly and perhaps a little too boldly, about did he ever think about whether his characters were likable, because of course a great many of them aren't very. He just about threw me against the wall. The very idea that a serious creator of fictions would have to think about, would have to even have it enter his mind whether a character is likable, was anathema to him, was absurd. And yet it's almost the first thing that a studio head or a producer looks at in a screenplay or in approaching an adaptation. It may be that the Forrest Gump of Winston Groom's novel is not particularly likable. In the movie, he had to be. That is the basis of the movie, is that this guy, whatever else he may be, is adorable.
I get innumerable requests in book signings, and this has gone on for 20-something years, however long it's been since the movie came out. I'll be signing one of my books, and they always come with Forrest Gump, and they always want me to write in there, life is like a box of chocolates. Well, I didn't write that line. I wouldn't write such a line. I mean, the first sentence in Forrest Gump is Forrest Gump saying, let me say this, being an idiot is no box of chocolates. Eric Roth took that line and stood it on its head, and suddenly it is on the tongues of everybody, and not only in the country, in the world. So that's what I know about movies, which is basically nothing.
Why are you dying, Mama?
What Eric Roth did with that line is encapsulated a kind of a gem-like example of the art of adaptation. He made it into something that is an enormous philosophical step forward.
What's my destiny, Mom?
That gives you a kind of mood of the movie, which is this bittersweet, you never know what's going to happen, but you're going to take it as it comes.
Life is a box of chocolates, Forrest. You never know what you're going to get.
This whole mood of the movie that really captures people and inspires them is encapsulated in that adapted line. Maybe the chief tool that a novelist has that a screenwriter and a movie maker doesn't have is the internal monologue. A movie is about surfaces. Novels don't have to be about surfaces. In fact, novels are very often about what's going on under the surface. And the surface is just this thin carapace that may or may not be of interest. In a movie, it has to be of great interest, because all you're going to see is surfaces.
Cry with me, Forrest.
And everything that's revealed is going to be revealed through surfaces.
Dear God, make me a bird so I can fly far, far, far away from here.
It's very interesting, I think, what Eric Roth does in the screenplay of Forrest Gump, where Forrest Gump, to me, is largely a movie about transitions. The ironic transition of having the voiceover narration say X.
And always answer every question with, yes, drill sergeant.
And then have Gump say the same X.
Yes, drill sergeant!
Is a very sort of pleasant way to move the story along. Forrest Gump, the novel, is an extremely episodic novel. It's a kind of American version of a form called the picaresque. Picaresque comes from a Spanish literary form in which a character who was, in Spanish, it's a picaro, someone who kind of wanders the world and gets into adventures. When I first got into the movie business, I discovered that episodic was, to the movie business, a dirty word. We can't have episodic. The movie of Forrest Gump is a great deal more picaresque than movies are generally allowed to be. But the screenwriter, Eric Roth, has built into it these structural elements that make it feel much more of a piece.
You remember that time we prayed, Forrest?
Like the relationship with Jenny, which is a hugely more significant thing in the movie than it is in the novel. The relationship with Forrest's mother, also hugely a much more significant thing. And these sort of elements of Forrest that are highlighted in the movie, like the way he runs. You know, the whole running thing at the end of the movie, it doesn't happen in the book.
That day, for no particular reason, I decided to go for a little run.
I think I wanted him to do something absurd, something cathartic. Where he was so upset, he said, I just ran to the end of the road, and then when I got there, I decided, and that's how I wrote it. I mean, I had no idea where I was going. And so then I decided to run to the end of the county.
And I figured since I run this far, maybe I'd just run across the great state of Alabama. And that's what I did.
It's consistent with thematic stuff in the movie. We have him run a number of times with football and running from the kids, and and also where he's sort of getting rid of the shackles of his braces. I mean, in other words, it's not out of the blue. When he got to the end of the country, he hadn't really obviously dealt with all of his, whatever was tearing him apart. So he ran the other way, and then finally he does. He comes to the end of it. And that was the run.
There's an important difference between the book and the movie also in its politics. Because at the time, for whatever reason, Winston Groom thought it was important to make a very specific anti-Vietnam statement. Forrest Gump comes back from Vietnam, and whenever he's asked to speak about it, he says it was a bunch of shit. And this is portrayed as being very shocking to people and very sort of over the top and almost a strident protest. Had that element been brought into the movie in the early to mid-90s, it would have seemed very odd, because the view that Vietnam was a bunch of shit was by then commonplace.
We're watching Abby. And action, guys.
Now, what do you have to say about the war, man?
War in Vietnam?
The war in Viet-fucking-Nam!
I stood on my head. I went from trying to write some great speech about war, about humanity, suffering, whatever it was, never very good. Then I thought maybe I could write something really funny. And I didn't do that. And I even enlisted like Billy Crystal to help me, as a friend of mine. What could we have in here that'd be really friggin' funny? Nothing. So I said this to Bob Zemeckis. I said, I don't have a clue what to put here. So Bob said, I know what we'll do. This was Bob's idea, it wasn't mine. He said, let's just have him pull the plug on the thing. And that's what happens. They pull the plug on it, so you never hear what he says. And the only one who hears it's funny. And when you know that Abby Hoffman, he supposedly starts crying, so moved by what he says. And he says, that's this beautiful man, or whatever. He said it all, and he goes like that. And that was Bob. I mean, that was pretty great.
Discover what works on the page of a screenplay and what works on screen in cinema. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes audiences don't need to see everything that you thought they needed to see in a script. One good example of that is the death of Jenny's father. How much do you need to see to understand who he represented and who she was in the movie and what pain she was suffering from or living with?
In my script, I had her kill him. I mean, you knew she did. So Bob always said, and I think he probably was right in the long run, that he said, if she kills that man, as bad as that guy is, the audience will never recover from it. They won't ever let her off the hook.
At the end of the day, despite the fact that we showed more when we shot the scene, which was closer to the screenplay surrounding the death of Jenny's father, we chose to show less because we wanted the audience to remain sympathetic to Jenny. And also, that kind of a graphic scene really wasn't necessary in a movie like Forrest Gump. So you know, you're always surprised, or you always find your way through these things about what, you know, what eventually works on screen.
A lot of people will come away from an adaptation saying, gee, the book was so much better than the movie, and of course, it's often the case. And I have to say, when the book is absolutely great, it's almost always the case that the book is better than the movie. There's just more that can be in a book. A movie is movie's 2 hours, you know, and you can only do a certain amount in 2 hours. And there are so many collaborators involved, and there's so many possible weak links, and you have to make it in a certain period of time, and it's very expensive, and the clock is ticking, and, you know, one day the weather stinks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. None of that happens to a book author, so a book is more likely to be a bigger, better experience if it's a very good book. But we all know examples of movies that are better than the book. I would dare to say that Forrest Gump is one of them.
People often ask me, well, how did you come up with the name Forrest Gump? And as near as I can tell, back when I was in the Army, we came back from Vietnam in 1967 to San Francisco. And all I had was a uniform. And I learned something very quickly that in 1967, if you wanted to meet girls in San Francisco, the uniform of a United States Army officer was not the thing to wear. The department store where I went was next to another store in San Francisco called Gump's. And it seemed to me a whimsical name. And so when it came time to name my character, the nearest I could, I said, you know, what do I got to name this guy? Gump. Yeah. So.
Show Tom how it's going to actually work. That's going to be you, right? You're standing there. And then, nope, you're out of sync, right? And that's how we're going to do it, right?
Roughly how we're going to do it.
Do you believe it?
How am I supposed to do that?
All right, one more full rehearsal, and then we'll shoot.
Here we go. Nice and quiet, ladies and gentlemen. Rehearsing, please.
The thing to watch for the most is Kennedy's eye line to Tom.
I remember being at a giant production meeting with Bob. And, of course, I think he loves to pull this stuff on me anyway. But in the meeting, it's the first time he throws up this shot he wants to put Forrest in, which is that Kennedy shot. And could I do it? And he's asking me right there. And it's like, well, I need to think about it, but like I always say, sure.
And playback.
Action and pause.
And how about you?
And shake, 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 shake.
Put it in his, can you get his hand in his hand?
Pause.
I have to pay.
Cut. That's getting good, Tom. Good. I don't know. I scaring me. Okay, good.
Here we go. Once
It'll
again.
be fine.
So if you look back on pictures that Bob Zemeckis has made, there's usually some spectacle that comes to mind. And usually that was driven by the collaboration of Ken Ralston and Bob Zemeckis. On each picture, Bob will come to Ken and say, okay, here's the problem. I got a woman, she's gonna fall down the stairs when she stands up, her head's on backwards. How are we gonna do that? I've got Michael J. Fox and I got his sister and brother in the future and they're all gonna interact with each other. How are we gonna do that? I've got real live action people and I got cartoon characters running around. How are we gonna do that? In the case of Forrest Gump, I think Bob presented with about 20 movies worth of problems that he had to solve, whether it was bringing characters into archival footage.
So are you enjoying yourself in our nation's capital, young man?
Duplicating massive crowd scenes, removal of the legs of Lieutenant Dan.
No shrimp.
And on in the movie.
Forrest Gump, John Lennon.
Welcome home.
Ken had to solve all these problems in one picture.
Back in the old days, you know, in the 90s, which we can call the old days, Island was actually starting their computer graphics department. And Forrest Gump was made right when the industry, the visual effects industry, was making the big transition from photochemical to digital.
I don't know if anyone really had looked that far ahead as what digital would, the kind of doors it would open up. It took a while for it to sink in for anybody.
Industrial Light and Magic was founded by George Lucas to work on Star Wars. Basically built this company from scratch to do his films. After Star Wars, Industrial Light and Magic had pretty much established itself as one of the leaders of visual effects. And in the 90s, it became very apparent for Robert Zemeckis that ILM was the perfect partner.
What was great about those days at ILM, it was a furnace of creativity. There was a lot of different movies being done and a lot of very different films. We had tons of technology to try and get a shot through, and it was painful. I mean, putting in the simplest thing, it sounded like into your shot would look like crap, and you'd have to spend forever doing it, where you might have made it look better, faster in an optical way, but we knew we had to go down this road because it made sense. In the end, it would all make sense. It made it much more exciting to have to work so hard, and then see the T-Rex coming into that shot and heading for the car and the kids. What they did is just, what?
All those different techniques that we learned through all the various films actually allowed us to look at Forrest Gump and realize that it wasn't quite impossible. What Bob was writing was not impossible and that we could actually achieve it.
Visual effects techniques are not typically developed just for their own sake. They're always in response to some need on the part of the filmmaker. We're presented with a challenge. How do you film something that you can't do in real life? And we have to figure out what techniques can be cobbled together to make this happen. Many visual effects techniques involve shooting separate pieces and then putting those images together afterwards. And up until 20 years ago, all that work was done by physically rephotographing elements on a device called an optical printer. That's essentially a camera pointed into a projector. Optical compositing had inherent limits that were built into it. There were some things that just couldn't be done. There were some things that could only be done a certain number of times before the dirt accumulated on the elements or you risked scratching them. You couldn't see the results until it was developed the next day. So a great deal of energy went into just the mechanics of putting something together. I attended the University of Southern California film program. In fall of 1983, a guest lecturer that we had at USC was Linwood Dunn, a pioneer in visual effects. His career spans all the way from the 30s through the 70s. He showed a demo reel of work that he had done, which consisted of before and after, some of the original elements and then the finished results.
Here is Alan Young and Jackie the Toothless Lion. That lion had been in the business so long that he should have had a guild card, I guess.
And he explained in his East Coast accent the methodology that he used to put them together.
This is the shot as it is shown in the picture, Androcles and the lion. Here's the art department sketch. The black areas are clear glass. The painting is all on plate glass. Here is the group of people that are used on all the various levels. Here's the setup on the stage. The projectors are back of the picture. Now here's the Mitchell camera that photographs the painting and the projected images. All right, here's the shot of the painting composited with the various groups of people at the different levels.
Here's a classic example of visual effects, technique that we always use, which is the whole challenge of how do you have an actor play against himself?
Well, you're Terry, and you're Ruth. You've no idea how much this relieves me.
That's nice.
You shoot your one actor first in a shot. They do the performance. And then you shoot the other half of it on the other side of the screen to be the identical twin. And using only the two sides of the split to make it look like there's two of the same people talking to each other.
What possible harm can it do? None. None whatever.
Before digital compositing techniques, this had to be done in a darkroom where you would project your image down onto the photographic paper, but you would mask one side of it so it would stay unexposed. And then you would move the mask to the other side, load the other negative, and make the other exposure onto the paper. And then when that was developed, we'd have one image. If that edge, if the mask was sharp, it was sometimes easy to see where it was. And so a trick that was used very often was to put that mask out of focus. And then that made it a soft blend from one to the other. And the same technique was used for film.
Before I start any project, I try to find any films done prior to that that may have work on it that is similar to what I'm about to do, at least to give me inspiration to try to raise the bar. And for Forrest, I was looking at Zelig, that would take an archival background, and Woody and Mia Farrow were standing in front of a blue screen, and to blur that area, you have someone in period dress walk behind them or in front of them to make you think it's all part of the many levels of the real environment. And then plus you have to take the image of Woody Allen and all the others and give that an aging process so it all sort of blends together also.
And it created this illusion that Woody Allen was actually there. And so we really kind of took that to heart. And when we were working on Forrest Gump, we wanted to take it to the next level. Because obviously it's all trickery. And one of the things that we wanted to do was really immerse the Tom Hanks character with the archival footage. Immerse it in the sense that he actually touched and interacted with the historical characters. If we didn't have a computer, there's no way we could have done that optically. ILM was where I first learned how to use a Mac, and how to use the Mac as a tool to do artwork. And at that time, that was unheard of, and it was actually with the advent of Photoshop, John Knowles, fantastic photo editing and painting tool. And he said, Doug, you really have to try this and see if you can actually create artwork with this tool. When I saw that, it was just this amazing light bulb that clicked in my mind that this is the future of visual effects.
Mama named me after the great Civil War hero, General Nathan Bedford Forrest.
Originally, when the character of Nathan Bedford Forrest was introduced in the movie, it was scripted to be a big lynching scene with the Ku Klux Klan in the South. You'd see horses pounding down this dirt road and, stringing up a rope over a limb of a tree, and it was a pretty elaborate sequence. By the time we got to shooting that scene, it was right at the end of the schedule, and frankly, we had run out of time and money. And Bob, in his inventiveness, whenever he's backed into a corner, he often paints himself out in a much more lyrical and often more beautiful way than the way that it was scripted to begin with. And that's what happened in this case. He came up with the idea one morning. He says, what about Birth of a Nation? All I have to do is get one shot, get Forrest on a horse, have him dressed like Nathan Bedford Forrest, boom, done.
The Birth of a Nation shot was much more complicated than you might think.
And it was pretty horrifying to do because we had no information about the shot. So we'd look at the old footage and say, well, it looks like this type of a lens. And it looks like we're this high off the ground, and it looks like the lighting's coming from a certain angle. We have to duplicate all of that at Will Rogers State Park so we can blend Tom into the background footage. And it took a lot of guesswork, but we managed to get it pretty close.
The other stuff that was incorporated in that is we started off, it's supposed to be a still of Tom, so we did all this paintwork to look like an old photograph. And then that starts moving, and then that sort of introduces you into the scene. Degrading Tom's image so it looked like all the stuff from the original footage, which was in pretty bad shape.
And then there's a lot of rotoscoping to put Tom, there's no green screens or anything out there, to put him in front of that crowd. And I thought it was an interesting part of the movie, which is they take off, but what you can see in the shot is there's rubber tire marks in the road in the original footage, which of course wouldn't have been around at the time. And we were asking each other, well, we've already messing with this. Do we get rid of those tire marks from this classic movie or we just leave them in? So we left them in.
Lieutenant Dan, ice cream.
To amputate Gary's leg, since he wouldn't let us cut his legs off, that wasn't in his contract. First of all, we had to design shots. This was the important part. Design shots that used the technology
to really sell to the audience that he had this horrible accident.
Harper? There's been tricks done before with hiding legs through false floors and false beds. Really, it was trying to lead you there to think you knew it was going to happen and then just keep going further than you ever thought you were about to see. And in a way that there's no way to cheat it is always the trick. There's no way to cheat what you're seeing.
What's happening there is the bed has holes in it. His legs are just down in there. The guy comes in, picks him up. We made sure he didn't hit anything with him. So then the holes in the bed were repaired digitally so they don't exist. The shadows of his real legs were removed because you're seeing them. And Gary's wearing blue stockings, which helped us a little bit on trying to pull some mats. And we covered Gary's legs at the end of the stumps with some digital bandages, which blended into the real bandages that just were at the end of his knee, basically. So it gave it the sense that it was just this cut off stump of a leg.
Besides all the technical challenges of making it work with the bandaged leg stumps and getting rid of the real legs, the scene where he's on the boat, he swings around the boat and jumps off. We basically cut a big chunk out of the side of the boat. So physically, Gary would move his real legs through a space that you couldn't really do. Same with the floor that he's sitting on when he falls out of his wheelchair. Everyone was wondering, well, if he really is there, then how did he pass through the physical objects in the set? And it just helps you get past trying to do detective work on it and just go with what the movie's saying. So by making it that complicated, you just think he's, legless. This is the kind of effect that could never have been done with film. There's too many subtle blends and too many nuances in the shot that you can only do in digital.
At the time you made it, did you ever consider doing the encounters with historical figures as straight live action, or were they always planned as
No, they were
effects?
always planned as effects. As a matter of fact, the whole year I was prepping the movie, I had these two young guys who were running around in every archive library in the world looking for, and Eric will remember the pain that we went through.
Oh, yeah.
I would find these little clips of Johnson or Kennedy, and we would then start to write the scene on how we could, fit that little, like the whole thing with the Forrest and football was because we found, a scene of Kennedy, talking to the football players. So we backed all that into what clips I could find.
President Kennedy met with the Collegiate All-American Football Team at the Oval Office today.
In 1993, making a picture like Forrest Gump, of course, you didn't have the tools that you have today. But I think that when you don't have the computer or off-the-shelf software that can solve the problems of yesteryear, I think it makes you more inventive in the story. The archival scenes had an inherent charm in them because we were forced to find these moments that we could even imagine getting Forrest into. And rather than writing a scene and being able to just simply replicate it with today's technology, we had to wedge our scene into an existing piece of material. And I think that made it somehow inherently more inventive and more interesting.
Why is the screen blue? The camera's like that. Furthest. No, I know the answer for blue. You know the answer for blue?
No, why is that?
Because it's the only color that does not exist in the human skin pigment.
That one there?
Yeah.
Did they discover that by accident at some point?
At least found in nature.
Some guy in some TV stage studio somewhere.
Some guy.
Hey, look what happens when he stands in front of the thing.
Congratulations. How do you feel?
I gotta pee.
I believe he said he had to go pee.
The Kennedy shot of him saying, I believe he has to go pee, was one of the very first shots that we had done. A lot of people were involved with it. We were just starting to create the technology. It took months figuring out how to do that stuff. In fact, a lot of the movie, I think, moving forward might have been based on some of those early tests just to make sure we could do the scenes that we were planning on doing.
Yeah, okay. And let's bring in about 6 more doctors.
Okay, that's good, Bob, but don't put the pause in it this time.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
When we saw the archival footage of John F. Kennedy, the background didn't quite suit what Robert Zemeckis wanted, so we actually had to extract the John Kennedy element from that background. And you do that by using a technique called rotoscoping, which is you outline and you basically create a mat for John F. Kennedy and pull him optically out of the background. And it's frame by frame, 24 frames to a second, so it's very laborious, very tedious. What it gives you is a clean element of John F. Kennedy that then you can combine with any other background. We had our new recreated background with the extras walking by. You had the new Tom Hanks element as Forrest Gump. And then the last element was actually the sort of hand-painted lip resyncing of John F. Kennedy's dialogue. And that all goes into the whole magic of sort of tying the scene together, because the more tricks you can do, the more gags that you can kind of fool the audience with, the tighter the image becomes and the more seamless the shot becomes.
Well, the one thing that I see, it looks like he's wearing dentures at about this moment here.
I've always said the first 95% of an effect shot is the easy part. That last 5%, if you're doing it right, can take forever and be the part you just massage and massage till you get it right.
I break down the soundtrack first, and then I do an overall morph to get the timing of just the gross movement of the jaw and so forth, disregarding the detail on what the morph is going to do to the mouth. And so once that's done, and once Ken likes sort of the general direction of it, I go back in. I would select certain keyframes where the extreme morph positions are, and I would paint in a fresh mouth pair, a set of lips and the teeth. And then I would do little submorphs between those, and I plug those morphs back into the overall range. Let's say on this extreme here.
The challenge for us to change Kennedy or anybody else talking is that every day you're talking to people. Now, I can do a planet exploding, I can have a giant sea serpent come out of the ocean, you go, yeah, that's cool, looks real. Well, it doesn't look real, but you accept it more because you don't know what it looks like. But you're used to people talking, so the smallest thing that's wrong, an audience won't really know what that is, but they'll know something's wrong. And there's other scenes in the movie that aren't as successful, that it's the subtlest thing that throw it off. John Lennon's scene has some stuff that's like shaky ground.
Hard to imagine.
Well, it's easy if you try, Dick.
But it was so hard to even get it that close. It's hard to believe how hard that was back then. It's like we had to break all this ground. So now you see way too many talking animals on commercials. You can change anybody to talk, little babies talking. It's like, sometimes I wonder what we did was the right thing.
Send me as a greeting or message to someone's email or mobile phone. I'm sure to brighten your day.
But Forrest really did cross a line where you have film footage, you have documentary footage, you have, important political figures you're screwing with. We could have had them say anything. We had these discussions all the time, just wondering about, well, where could this lead?
So everyone looking at the tape there, and I ought to get you fellas down to Hyannisport, have a little chowder, play a little touch football down there. No, well, come on.
Bob, it was as though Kennedy was in the room.
Print that one, that was pretty good.
All right, what's more?
Go, you can do it. Just get up there, go on. That's it.
When we finally finished filming in South Carolina, we were about to embark on a completely different movie of Forrest Gump, which was the entire DC portion of the film. Gosh, all of my fears turned out to be true, because here we were, the very first scene we were going to do was staging this huge rally at the Lincoln Memorial. All of a sudden you're confronted with hundreds and hundreds of extras. What area of the Lincoln Memorial can you shoot on? Where can you, put the buses that brought all the demonstrators in? I mean, it was like massive logistics.
This is a multiple split shot where we're trying to turn about 700 people into probably 250,000 people here.
Listen up, please. Sinise Forest.
Your eye line changes to the speaker at the corner of the wading pool.
We start placing our extras all around the pool for as many passes as we can get, setting them up so they match the previous grouping's position, and we shoot the same camera move each time.
Well, do you think we should do it again?
All right, we're gonna go back to number one. We're gonna shoot it again. It's gonna be even better this time.
Half the crowd left after lunch because it was so cold. So we had a lot less people to work with, so we had to just keep moving as fast as we could. And then all had to be pieced together later in the computer, but it still was very painful because the crowds had to be rotoscoped to a certain extent so that one matted group could then be put in front of the one behind it, and behind, and just keep piecing it together.
That scene took about 6 months to do. Nowadays, we actually have tools and software that can make that a lot easier. There's programs that can actually replicate digital characters that will look like real crowds and move like real crowds without actually hiring any extras at all. They don't quite hold up in close-up yet, but it's another tool that, in hindsight, you really appreciate how much pain and effort went into creating some of these scenes.
Getting into films like Forrest opened up, for me anyway, a way to use digital technology in a very subtle way, not big and explosive, although there's some of that in the movie, but it's how to use it in subtle blends and how to change a sky when nothing else is touched. Like the birds flying out of the cornfield. Walking down the avenue of the trees, and the shadows are moving at an accelerated rate. It's a strange sort of dreamlike moment. And the film is full of altering stuff to give the film more of what Bob originally wanted in those shots. It's subtle touches like that that really help give the film that kind of magical quality that it has.
In some ways, it could be argued that the old analog technique was a little bit more of a craft because it involved a lot of instincts. I would say that equally now in the digital realm, it's just as hard because we now have new challenges. With new tools and new abilities, always comes greater expectation, and those greater expectations are actually being met now with the greater tools. And so it's kind of this ongoing, sort of mountain that you can never climb because the goals and the achievements and the expectations just keep rising with the tools.
When we try to look to the future about where's the industry going, it's usually not so much a matter of us deciding that there's a direction that we want to head. The best innovations have come in response to scripts. So a script will come in the door and there'll be some aspect of it that can't be done with the tools that we have now. And so the best minds here get together to work out, all right, how are we going to be able to do this? And that is what drives the innovation forward.
Hello. My name's Forrest Gump.
The character of Forrest and Tom's characterization of him evolved. And the one thing we didn't want to do is we just didn't want to have Tom Hanks doing a Southern accent.
We had a lot of discussion about this, not doing anything or doing something that was really heavy. Those must be comfortable shoes.
We actually tried out reading the entire screenplay in different accents and characterizations.
I've worn lots of shoes. I mean, I'm no fabulous linguist, so I was trying to soft pedal it as much as possible and was really lost until Michael was cast as young Forrest.
All right, Forrest. You can open your eyes now.
And that was it.
Hey, Danny, watch this.
Toward the end of the casting process, we became very desperate to cast both young Forrest and young Jenny. We sort of landed on a young Jenny who came from Colorado, but young Forrest was really still very elusive. If there is a magical moment, it must have been when at an open casting call, this young boy from Mississippi came and decided he wanted to try out for this part of a little boy in a movie called Forrest Gump.
The report for this audition showed up on the 7 o'clock news one night. My parents heard about it, and they told me, they asked me if I wanted to go to an audition and, try out for a movie, and just for fun, I was like, yeah, let's go do it.
And this is how these things work. You see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids, and then one of them just, grabs onto you. Of course, then we're terrified because here's someone who's never been in front of a camera before, and so we put him through a pretty extensive screen test to see if he wasn't gonna crack under pressure.
Marker?
The seat's taken.
After the auditions in Memphis, they called us up for a screen test in LA.
You can sit here if you want.
This was a big trip for me. I was 8 years old at the time, and I had never gone anywhere before, and this was the first time I was flying on a plane.
What's wrong with your legs? Oh, nothing at all, thank you. My legs are just fine and dandy.
Hannah Hall and I got to do our initial screen test together. We hadn't gotten the part yet. We were both still on the run against probably 5 or 6 other kids. But they had us all there in the same spot, and they were just randomly pairing people together. I remember we kind of hit it off from the bat, we kind of became friends there. And we're both like, yeah, this would be pretty cool if he actually got the parts, but I guess neither one of us, seriously thought that was going to happen.
Wake up, Forrest, wake up. Jenny, what are you doing here?
We were just flabbergasted. I mean, it was so real and so unique. Everybody was so enamored with what they saw that we finally had found our young guy, and production could go on as we planned.
Are you coming along? Mama said not to be taking rides from strangers. This is a busted school.
We never had the real template for the way Forrest needed to sound, for good or for bad. And when Michael came in, we said, well, I think there it is.
I'm Forrest Gump. I'm Dorothy Harris. Well, now we ain't strangers anymore.
He just had this voice that seemed to come right out of his backbone.
Mama says stupid is as stupid does.
So it was taking literally the way his vocal cadences are and trying to make him grow up a little bit.
From that day on, we was always together. Jenny and me was like peas and carrots. She taught me how to climb.
Come on, Forrest, you can do it.
I showed her how to dangle.
Good little monkey.
She helped me learn how to read. And I showed her how to swing. Sometimes we just sit out and wait for the stars.
Mama's gonna worry about me. Just stay a little longer.
For some reason, Jenny didn't ever want to go home.
Okay, Jenny, I'll stay.
It was an original accent. If we went to a dialect coach and they were trying to break down, is this Alabama, is this Mississippi? This kid had his own accent. And it was perfect because this is who Forrest is, too. Forrest is his own original person. And you really couldn't kind of expect him to come from anywhere other than kind of Forestville, which is what Michael Humphrey kind of sounded like.
You got one of those radio constraints.
Yeah, it's right here. Me and Tom Hanks spent a lot of time together. I guess he was trying to feed off of me and, get an idea for the Forrest Gump character. Well, I was a natural Southern kid to begin with. I was kind of quirky. I already kind of fit the young Forrest role. And really, in the end, it was just me exaggerating myself to display that.
So, Michael, what do you do in the film? Who do you play?
What do you mean?
What character do you play?
Forrest.
Who's Forrest?
Forrest Gump.
We're trying to hang around with him, and I was surreptitiously trying to stick a tape recorder in his face. When you meet somebody for the first time, he's seen a bunch of movies I'm in. And sometimes people clam up and they won't say a thing.
Is he stupid? What does his mom say about being stupid?
Stupid is as stupid does.
See? We drove past the theater back there in Beaufort, the hectoplex that shows every movie going. And I asked him what his favorite movies was.
Tell me your favorite movie. Most favorite of all time. Which is it?
It's not one with you in it.
I know, that's okay.
Jurassic Park.
See, now there you go. He just took off on Jurassic Park and gave me every inflection and every vowel and every consonant and talking about that Jurassic Park. It was a real fount of knowledge that came out of that movie for me.
Now, here's what you're going to do. You're going to step up to your mark with the rock and say, hey, what's your line?
Watch this, Jenny.
Watch this, Jenny. And then when Hannah gets up alongside you under her mark, you're going to toss it.
The dialect coaches that worked with me wanted me to perfect some of the lines in the movie, such as, you know, my name is Forrest Gump, and stupid as stupid does. Being a kid from Mississippi, I already had a really southern accent at the time, but I guess they wanted me to draw it out just a good bit more, you know, to really put a little character to Forrest with it.
And you guys are going to just freeze and watch.
He has syllables where there's no syllables. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Then you're going to cut it.
I was working with Jessica Drake, our dialogue coach, and she was able to almost mathematically plot out, you know, the way Michael was going to be saying certain things.
Come back a little bit. Right there.
It was dead solid every time.
And it did have a lot of logic because it was clear that here we plucked this young boy out of Mississippi and we weren't going to drum in any you should do it like this kind of skills into this young boy. I mean, he wasn't an actor, he was just an original kid. It made more sense what Tom was doing, which was to take on some of these vocal phrasings and characteristics of this young boy and bring that into his character, being the actor that he was, who could basically do just about anything.
Well, you try it first.
You say it first.
Just do it now. Just say that was the best splash ever. Right. Like after you just threw it in.
That was the best splash ever.
Okay. All right. I guess I say it.
I guess so.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Sorry. I didn't mean to confuse you.
Let me hear you.
That was the best splash ever.
So when my parents were telling me about the character and everybody was telling me about how the kid was going to be slow, I didn't really know what they meant by that at first.
I'm going to show you something, Mrs. Gump.
I wasn't sure if they meant, well, he was just completely stupid or he was just like uneducated or just not exposed or something.
Right here.
That's exactly what I was thinking. He just hadn't been exposed as everyone, you know, I guess probably kept in by Mama Gump all the time, right? Really hadn't seen much of the rest of the world or whatever. And so it just took him a little more time to catch up with everyone else. And I was a pretty quirky kid when I was 8 years old. You know, my mom was always talking about that too, so we always figured that it wouldn't take too much for me to pull off a character like that.
Hey, dummy! Are you retarded or just plain stupid?
The scene with the leg braces was a pretty cool one.
Run, Forrest! Run away! Hurry!
We were set up on the driveway that was running up to the Gump house. They had prepared the braces, and they had made 2 different copies, and both of them had cap bombs installed in the joints of the braces so that they could be remote detonated, and they could blow off my legs while I was running.
We had to set little tiny explosive devices in there in order to release them so that they would actually, you know, shatter in the air.
The day we shot the scene, they took me down to a shop and demonstrated what they were going to do with one pair they had rigged up. Went ahead and blew the cap bombs and blew the braces apart. Kind of freaked me out a little bit. I was like, wow, I really don't want those coming off my legs like that, you know?
I remember going back a couple of times to do that scene on Oak Alley, and he was very trepidatious about it. We did a ramp with the camera where we actually changed the speed of the film so that he would start going in slow motion right at the breaking out of these braces. And then, you know, when you saw him look up with this big, happy smile on his face, I wonder if that look came from his thrill over the fact that he hadn't been injured by these braces that were detonating off of his legs.
See?
I think that the filmmakers of Forrest Gump, Robert Zemeckis in particular, they had their times when maybe they were a little chafed by having a lot of kids on the set, such as myself, running around, because I'm sure we were very hard to control. I know we were hard to control. I remember being hard to control.
You know, Bob had a tolerance level that was met head on working with the children on Forrest Gump. And there was a stage in the production where I noticed that a few what I would call second unit type sequences, most of which are not in the movie, were delegated to me because I think Bob had felt like, look, I got the hero moments I need. Now can you get these other little bits like Forrest crossing the bridge with the fisherman for the 3rd time? Bob said, you can do that scene.
That boy sure is a running fool.
I got to see the movie for the first time when I was 9 years old, when it came out in '94. I had no idea what to expect. I'd imagined it over and over and over again, wondering what it would be like. When I first saw myself, I was just thinking, you know, wow, I can't believe I'm up there.
Forrest,
I didn't really know all the scenes from the movie. I hadn't been there when they had filmed much of it, obviously. So there were some things that surprised me being a 9-year-old kid. You know, some of the more adult scenes that were going on, some of the violence in the Vietnam War scenes. And it was a pretty striking movie for me at 9 years old. Like I said, I'd never seen anything quite that intense. Having had the experience with Forrest Gump, I think I'd really much rather be a kid. Being 9 years old, I just wanted to be out with my friends playing. I wasn't, you know, horribly interested in going back out to California and just doing audition after audition. Parents weren't too thrilled about the prospect either. They didn't want me to get into the whole child star thing. So we figured that the best thing to do would be just to kind of, you know, take this and then wait it out till I was a little older. You know, in my teens, and then I could really make the decisions on my own and decide if I wanted to go back into it, and I'd be a little more grown up and have a little more control and awareness of it all.
So how do Forrest and Jenny know each other?
Well, we met on the bus.
Tell me about that.
Well, no one would let him sit in the seat, and I was the only one that let him sit in the seat.
Why would no one let you sit in the seat?
Because he had braces on, and everybody thought it was weird. He was really weird. They'd be mean to me.
What? Okay, hold the camera. So why does Jenny not make fun of Forrest?
Well, I don't really have any friends, and I just like him, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So you were just doing a scene over there. What did you do in the scene? What were you doing?
Well, it was the transition. We look in the pond, and then it changes into the older Forrest and older Jenny.
Oh, okay. And so what do you have to do in the scene, Michael?
It's kind of hard to throw on the rock, because it can't really get on the mark. Whoever kids out there are watching this, movies don't look as easy to make as they are.
All right, great.
Okay, Connor, you can stop now.
All right. Thanks very much.
Keep it on.
Okay.
I want to do something.
Do something.
I got involved with Forrest Gump because I had worked with Tom Hanks for many years prior to that. I started with Tom, or first met Tom, when we did Dragnet 87. And we did the Burbs and you know, and other things. And I was requested by Tom. Well, the main thing is I wanted to get a certain flesh tone on Tom. Tom has kind of a sallow complexion, so I wanted to stay close to that, but still a little different, and to give me leeway to go elsewhere as we progressed with the film. So I introduced some pinks and other tones of juvenile flesh tones, if you will, and to start off that. Mainly the aging, as far as I was concerned with Tom, was a change in texture and color of the face more than it wasn't leathering the face or anything like that. It was more textural and color. Now, we designed hair pieces that would glue to his forehead and comb into the butch cut. And there were 4 different stages of that, each one being smaller and regressing further back until we finally, in the final part of it, got to Tom's own hairline.
Hey, stupid!
Quit it! Run, Forrest, run!
Hey! Did you hear me, stupid?
Run,
Come
Forrest!
on, get in the truck, let's move it! Come on, it's getting away, move it!
Run, Forrest, run!
Hallie DeMore, who was makeup artist on Forrest Gump and received the Academy nomination as I did, she was doing Robin, and You know, particularly on a female as pretty as Robin, it's a very delicate thing to get really working in nuances. And Hallie went into that very, very deeply in the drug problem and everything else that Jenny had. You think of some of the work in the bedroom when she was at her lowest ebb, and some of at the parties with the glitter makeup and all that. It's just some wonderful trans. Wonderful job on Jenny.
Don't ever let anybody tell you they're better than you, Forrest. If God intended everybody to be the same, he'd have given us all braces on our legs.
Mama Gump is young. Hallie DeMori also did Sally's makeup and did a wonderful corrective makeup. You think of Mama Gump walking with little Gump, you know, down the street and some of those things. And just wonderful look on Sally.
What's my destiny, Mom?
You're gonna have to figure that out for yourself. Life is a box of chocolates, Forrest. You never know what you're gonna get.
Now, when we got to the age makeup, I was involved, and I had been working with some new types of plastics out of Switzerland, and decided to go with this new method. And I had developed a kind of a method where you lay the plastic across where the crow's feet or the smile lines would be, or right in them. And then you'd have the artist squeeze their face and would roll that up onto the land between the lines. So it would make a roll rather than making a crease. And it worked magnificently, and particularly on Sally. And we went in and delicately painted with water brushes, all of our colors and everything. So we didn't have a heavy mask look.
Lieutenant Dan!
They gave you the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Yes, sir, they surely did.
They gave you an imbecile, a moron who goes on television and makes a fool out of himself in front of the whole damn country, the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's just perfect.
Gary was very concerned about putting facial hair on him. And he had meetings with Bob and with Hallie and myself. And it was finally agreed that we were going to shoot him in fairly good sequence so that he could have his own beard. As you remember, it was a very thin, scraggly, see-through type beard. And so it was his own beard, but it was with a wig. And then, of course, darkening under the eyes, and once again using that transparency type color that we used, and aging the teeth, rotting the teeth somewhat as he deteriorates, you know. And it worked on Gary, you know.
What's wrong with your lip?
I was born with big gums, sir.
Yeah, well, you better tuck that in. Gonna get that caught on a tripwire.
It was called a dental plumper. It was a prosthesis that we made for the lower gum line to puff his lip out. And it was, as I recall, I think it was Bob Zemeckis' idea. And it was brilliant, because it just made Bubba.
Tell us a little bit about the war, man.
The one in Vietnam?
War in Viet-fucking-Nam!
When we were getting ready to film the mall scene from the Lincoln Memorial, with all those huge amount of extras, the main company was still shooting in Savannah. And I sent a contingent to Washington. We had construction build facilities, work tables and mirrors and electricity, etc., right alongside a wardrobe, and had most of those people pre-cut. By pre-cut, I mean that period of hairstyling and sideburns, and fitted with sideburns. Those who didn't, most of them didn't have sideburns by the time we were shooting. So we put a lot of sideburns on, a lot of mustaches for that period, and a lot of hair extensions. Forrest Gump was a huge challenge because we had outlandish climactic conditions to deal with. We also had a constricted schedule so that a unit of us would go out every Saturday night for 8 weeks and film Forrest running. And of course, as you know, all those sequences, he kept changing and his beard kept growing until finally in Monument Valley, he's got this beard down to here. I would hand lay that because I felt that was really the only way to go for it to look real. So all those beards were put on piece by piece by piece, and curled and dressed. Well, ultimately it's all a matter of taste. All filmmaking is. And our job, of course, we work in you either work in a tasteful way or it's absolutely terrible, because it's so out there in front of everything, particularly in a big close-up. And exercising good taste, I would say, is one of the preeminent things a makeup artist must do when you're involved in a motion picture.
There's a scene in Gump where Forrest is running from a group of young neighborhood bullies, and Forrest has braces on. He's not very good at running. And like in a nightmare, there's no way that he can run fast enough to get away from these bullies who are on their bicycles. And so just like in a nightmare, things begin to slow down for him. And though he tries to run faster, he actually feels like he's running slower. And so Bob Zemeckis decided to slow down the visual imagery there, to go into slow motion. And so we see the bicycle wheels of the bullies that are chasing him going slower. And that is a great opportunity for sound, because anytime that you're in that kind of subjective point of view space emotionally and dramatically, it gives us, the sound people, a lot of latitude to play with the sound and to really use the sound the way you would use music. And so we can then slow down the wheels turning of the bicycle, but not only slow them down, we can focus on very specific sounds related to the bicycle in a way that wouldn't have made any sense if we were looking at the bicycles going at normal speed. So we've put playing cards on so that they would drag across the spokes of a bicycle, and recorded that in slower and slower motion. We made very, very close-up recordings of the chain on the bicycles so that we could focus on that sound if we wanted to, and that's exactly what we do in that sequence. You hear a kind of microscopic version, in a way, of these bicycles that are chasing Forrest, and the same thing is done with the sound of his braces as he's running, and especially as the braces begin to fall apart and fly all over the place. Forrest Gump was the first project I worked on with Bob Zemeckis. Bob asked me to work on it because he wanted a sound supervisor who was going to be really hands-on. And there are lots of different ways to do projects. Some supervisors are administrators, and some get their hands dirty, and that's my approach. I go out and make lots of recordings and do lots of experimenting myself, and it turns out that that's what he was looking for Gump.
The good thing about Vietnam is there was always some place to go.
Fire in the hole! Gump, check out that hole.
The Vietnam battle sequence in Gump was a dream for me to work on for several reasons. First, because of the way Bob decided to shoot and stage the scene. As you look at that scene and that sequence, you notice that it's shot in an unconventional way. Instead of beginning with a fairly wide establishing shot, so you see the large area where this battle is about to take place or is taking place, you begin very close to the soldiers. And as the battle begins, you get even closer to them. And in fact, the camera is down on the ground with the American soldiers. That swung the door wide open for me, because what it meant was the audience has the same point of view as the American soldiers do. You don't see the enemy that's firing at them. You see exactly what they see, and you hear exactly what they hear. And so that gave me the latitude to put in the sounds of bullets flying over their heads, which we wouldn't have been able to do if the scene had been shot more conventionally with typical wide shots, medium shots, etc., because there's no way in most of those shots we would have been in a place where we could have heard those bullets whizzing over our heads. There's no what we call production sound in the Vietnam battle sequence in Forrest Gump. Production sound is the sound that's recorded on the set while the cameras are rolling. And so in a sequence like that, it's pretty typical to have to replace all of the sound in post-production, and that's exactly what we did with the battle scene. And since you're going to replace it, it's going to be ideal to have control over each category of sound, so that when we finally mix all of those sounds together, if Bob Zemeckis says, well, at this point, really all I want to hear are the machine guns that are firing at the American soldiers, or at this point, all I want to hear is the sound of that soldier hitting the dirt, and we don't really want to hear any guns at that moment, or people screaming, etc., then you're able to do that. And so you come to what we call the final mix with a set of pre-mixed categories of sound. And in that battle sequence, we have dialogue, which is one pre-mix. And all of the dialogue in the battle sequence in Vietnam is what we call ADR, automated dialogue replacement. It's the actors coming in after the film has been shot and redoing their lines, in this case because the technical quality of the recordings that were made on the set wasn't acceptable for us. We have what's called Foley, which is essentially human movement sounds. That is the sound of the soldiers' feet on the jungle floor, the sound of their gear rattling and squeaking as they carry it and as they hit the dirt, etc. The sounds of their guns, handling the guns, that is, not the guns firing, that's a whole other category. But all of the handling of the guns, the cocking of the guns, etc., is handled by Foley. And finally, it's completely convincing that you're hearing somebody move and handle this gun, and you believe that it's the actor. In addition to dialogue and Foley, we have several categories of sound effects. In this battle scene, most of them revolve around guns, mortars, explosions, bullets. The tracers, which are the visual images of the bullets flying by people's heads, were quite a project, partly because those visual images were created by ILM. They were a visual special effect. When I saw what they looked like, it was clear to me what I needed to do. We went out and took various calibers of rifles and fired them at the ground at oblique angles, and I knew from experience that that would give us good ricochet sounds. And one kind of ricochet that you get if you fire a bullet at a hard object and it bounces, it causes the bullet to tumble end over end sometimes. And as it tumbles end over end, it makes a kind of whistling sound. But sometimes it doesn't really make a whistling sound, it just makes a kind of whirring sound just as it goes through the air. And as soon as I saw the visual effects that ILM had done for the tracers, I thought I can take pieces of that kind of ricochet and make that work for the sound of this bullet flying by people's heads. So, in fact, the sound of the tracers is not really a tracer. It's a bullet ricocheting off of something, but it's what worked best. In fact, the mortar sounds in the battle sequence are a combination of various kinds of sounds. Some of those sounds are actual mortars. Some are other kinds of bombs. We also blew up cans of gasoline. Very often when you're doing the sound for a film, you find that the actual thing that's on camera doesn't make the kind of sound that you need it to make. Because when you start doing sound design for movies, you quickly learn that it's the emotional or dramatic content of a sound that's the most important thing, not always the authentic, literal object that you're filming. And so you have to sort of divorce yourself from the literal in a way and just listen to sounds in kind of an unbiased way and think, how does that sound make me feel? And so though we certainly had lots of recordings in our library already of mortars landing, we decided that they just weren't powerful enough or evocative enough, and so we sweetened those with lots of other sounds that more or less relate to things exploding, blowing up, fire, etc., but many of them had nothing to do with mortars, and quite a few of them we recorded at Skywalker Ranch. I was not in Vietnam. I know quite a few people who were, and I can only imagine the emotional intensity of being in a battle, and so that's the area of my imagination that I called on when I was trying to orchestrate all of these sounds to make it seem as horrific as it is. The rain in the film is a combination of manufactured rain that we created and actual rain. Forrest says that it rained all the time in Vietnam, and in fact there's a sequence where you see it raining harder and harder and harder. And that rain was particularly difficult to do because it started pretty hard, and so by the time it got to the third or fourth moment when it was supposed to be even harder than that, we were afraid that it was just going to be a sort of wall of noise. And so we had to manufacture that rain in a way that would make it articulate and wet sounding. One of the problems of dealing with water of any kind, like surf or heavy rain, is that it tends to just turn into noise or a kind of roar that you can't even tell is water anymore. And so the rain that we made for the film then had to be a combination of actual rain, pretty dense rain, falling on leaves and falling on other water, pools of water, and recordings that we made in bathtubs and sinks or in studios, where you can get a microphone very close to the water actually impacting on whatever it's falling on without getting the microphone soaking wet from the rain falling on it. And then if you combine those really close-up, very articulate recordings of water splashing, falling, with the actual outdoor rain, you get something that you can control and make sound just as wet as you want it to sound. Ironically, Steve Starkey, the producer of the movie, and I more or less met by playing ping pong at Lucasfilm. And so it was funny when he asked me to work on this film that had so much ping pong in it. All of the ping pong sounds that you hear in the movie were done in post-production. None of the sounds that were recorded when the camera was rolling were usable. And so one of the fun things that we got to do, Steve and I and others, was to record ping pongs. And we used various kinds of paddles. We hit the ball off various kinds of surfaces. As usual, we're going for what the best sound is, not necessarily literally what you're seeing on the screen. And every one of those ping pong ball hits was recorded separately, believe it or not. And editors worked through the night to cut each one of those hits in sync, and it was a huge job.
Everything that's not literally the character and the narrative, that visual filmscape, that's what the production designer is involved with. In the very first instance, it's like a blank canvas. When a script comes in, there's no visuals yet. So the first person who's called in is the art director or the production designer, and that person then begins to bring the film to life. Bob called me for Forrest Gump, and what was great about getting that script was it was like being given a little hit of consciousness, because it was about somebody who was supposed to be really stupid, and yet that person never did anything stupid. So that means that you get to tell a story that takes everything that's normal and cut across it with something that's unusual. So you get to reveal that in an unusual way. And we could go from that point, which was to design a movie that was always based upon something that would be truthful emotionally. And so from there, the next step was really to say, where does this movie want to take place? What's it like where Forrest Gump lives?
We lived about a quarter mile off Route 17, about half mile from the town of Greenbow, Alabama. That's in the county of Greenbow.
We went to Alabama, which is where the story was supposed to take place. But in a sense, searching for Forrest Gump South was searching for a place that doesn't actually really exist. It's not to say that the South isn't the South, but it doesn't necessarily always appear the way you'd want it to. So I traveled quite a bit all around until I finally got to Savannah, and while we were in Savannah, went out to this park with all the old oak trees and the dripping Spanish moss. And there I could say, now we're in the South. I know we're in the South. And this is where Forrest Gump could begin to tell this tale. So from there, we branched out and found a place to build the house. And what was great about that was it was one property where we found this old oak alley with all this dripping Spanish moss. And when Bob came out there, he just said, well, this is talking to me. This is someplace I think Forrest would actually be. The house that is the Gump house, where Forrest grows up, is designed to be a house that you would recognize out of any era, from 1900 till the year 2000, as someplace that would be very much a home. Then we set about trying to figure out exactly what it should look like. So in looking at a number of houses in the area, we came up with an amalgamation of those to come up with a sort of very simple but yet clearly Southern-styled house that could be a boarding house and also would somehow almost create an icon for what Forrest represented. As you can see here, this illustration is the way we first envisioned the Gump house, and then we created another illustration in Photoshop, which was to be even more accurate. We then positioned the house in this frame here exactly where we thought it would look best in actual scale, and then positioned it in the computer so that from a very specific shot with a 28mm lens, we knew we would get the composition that Bob would want. As a final idea, just to make sure we had that house in the right place, we created a very simple facade so that Bob could actually come out there and say, yep, that's exactly where I want it. And the land that we actually found was a place that we could plant a field and create Jenny's farm, which was just down the road from Forrest. Across the street was the tree where Jenny and Forrest grew up and where Jenny's grave was, and also where part of the Vietnam sequence was filmed. Vietnam is not only a real place, it's a place in people's minds. But you knew that you wanted to somehow convey Vietnam not just as a place, but a concept, especially because it related to Forrest Gump. This isn't just Vietnam as it was. And Bob had an interesting idea about it, which was that he never wanted to actually see the Viet Cong. He never wanted to actually see the enemy. He wanted to tell it from the position of the platoon, and particularly Forrest, just having that attack come out of almost seemingly nowhere. So we found a place where we could actually plant a field that could look like it was in Vietnam. We actually brought in probably about 20 or 30 palm trees to create an area. that was actually the battlefield, and also designed it very specifically so that there was a road down the center that we could film both sides of it, and it would look like different places and then be easy for production. I think one of the toughest things about the movie was that I felt like I went way out ahead of the production and saw how really big this movie was. When everybody was getting overwhelmed in the South, and I would come back from Washington, D.C. and say, you ain't seen nothing yet, because we got only a few days up here to do an incredible amount in a very difficult situation within a city and a national park where you can't really control things. Technically, what we did is we went to the Washington Monument, and actually more specifically the Lincoln Memorial and the steps, and we staged the event. What I found to be interesting was to try to get the flavor of that particular year right, and just to get people now to write signs that looked anything like what the signs looked like back then was actually not that easy. The other sequence that's a lot of fun in that arena in Washington, D.C. is at the Watergate, because I, as the production designer, got to go to the Watergate Hotel and see where that room was that the actual break-in occurred, and then try to find the room that would actually overlook that, so that you could actually stage that scene. And it's fun to actually go back and retrace and imagine that you could have been actually in that room witnessing everything that Forrest Gump actually saw. One of the great things about being a production designer and working for Bob Zemeckis is that you're always creating a perfect world, his perfect world. And what he basically says, it's like Candide. He's saying, what I would like to see in my perfect world is, and then that's my job, is to create that perfect world. And it's very specific. It's not that he knows exactly what he wants to see before we come up with it, but it is fitting an emotional, aesthetic criteria that he needs in order to tell the story.
Some scenes you'd never guess would be for visual effects is when the guys, when Forrest is now the older Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks, he's being chased by the guys in the truck and they're still throwing rocks at this poor guy. Well, you don't want to run over Tom, at least that early in the show, maybe later, but the guys are supposed to be right behind him. So we shot Tom by himself, just running towards camera. This was in our Bluff Plantation, which is where the Forrest Gump house was built, going up that road on that beautiful oak sort of alleyway. He did all this running. Then we just had the guys in the truck do a couple of passes as they run towards us. And the trick was Tom would run at us and he exits. So the guys now in the truck are running at us, but we pan with them. So it's timed so that Tom exits on a lock off right when the truck starts to take over. So now we can pan, and when we pan around, there's a stunt guy out there finishing the run for Tom on the second piece. It's not Tom. He did the leap over the fence in the distance, if I remember correctly. And again, roto mats over Tom, him running by himself, a truck by itself. We did the same thing in as he enters for the first time the football field, and they wonder who this guy is who's running so fast. And again, he was shot by himself and doing the football scene, and then we shot the truck separately and then blended that together.
Run, Forrest! Run!
Yeah, you better be running.
Run, Forrest!
We're gonna get you, Forrest!
Forrest is filled with sequences that never made it into the movie. And one of my favorites was with Martin Luther King. And it was the first time we met Forrest Gump as an older Forrest Gump. And it started with young Forrest and Jenny by a pool of water. He throws a rock in, and when the rings of water dissipate, we see older Tom and Jenny in a reflection, and we come back up and reveal them. There's a scene with them.
I want you to hear something, Forrest. We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted in the freshman class for the fall term.
What's accepted mean, Jenny?
I'm going to college, Forrest. Over in Marion, isn't it something?
Yeah, that sure is something, Jenny. I never really knew anybody who went to college before, not even Mom.
What are you thinking about, Forrest? Forrest, look at me.
If you leave, who's gonna be my friend anymore?
I'll always be your friend. I just can't stay here the rest of my life. You know, I want to go places and meet people and see things.
Well, I want to go places and meet people and see things, too. Maybe I could get accepted and go with you.
Well, you know what? Maybe you could come visit me sometime.
Music!
Tom hears something. He goes, "It's a parade!"
A parade, Jenny!
He runs up to it, and it's this awful confrontation, of course, between Martin Luther King's Civil Rights March and, you know, the authorities. So he goes into the middle of it, not knowing what it is. He just thinks it's a parade, of course. And he's sort of looking around what's going on, and there's these guys, the cops there have these vicious dogs, these German shepherds that were trained to, when they let them go, they go charging at the group, the marchers, teeth bared, growling, furious. Tom, of course, as Forrest, sees the dogs. You have a quick flashback of young Forrest holding all these puppies, licking his face, because, of course, Forrest knows all these dogs, too, like he knows everybody. He runs out there just to play with them because he doesn't know anything bad's going on. He picks up a stick, he yells all their names, throws the stick. The dogs are trained to do a beautiful 90-degree quick turn, boom, and race off. He's out there playing with them, and he diffuses the whole thing. Comes back in and he apologizes to Martin Luther King for sort of disrupting the parade.
Sorry about your parade. They just dogs. They don't know any better.
And then he takes off.
Here! Steve! Here! What do I got? I got my stick. Oh, right, lad. Who wants this? Oh, come on, come on. Here we go. Get that stick.
Sorry they interrupted your parade. They're just dogs. They don't know any better.
The George Wallace sequence basically started with a couple of Bob's guys just culling through miles of archival footage, just like all of the sequences, and picking out scenes that came close to being able to be edited into some kind of a sequence to tell this story. So we shot a lot of live action footage, which was then basically made to look weathered and grainy to match the rest of the footage that we had. Then we saw the scene with George Wallace in it, and how do we marry that together?
I'm going to be behind this guy?
No, you're going to be poking your head out right here.
Right behind it?
Yeah, right behind it. Yeah, I'll show you right. And then you're right here. Sure. Kind of just watching him and the crowd that's going on. Kind of like doing a lean in, like, you know, like there's people that you're at, right.
Looking out at the folks and stuff?
Yeah.
Funny little man was at the schoolhouse door saying segregation this and segregation that.
Right.
But what's funny is, in a weird way, is there's two people in there that are blue screen guys that we shot against a blue screen. But they weren't shot the same day because the second security guy was not available that day. So we shot Tom earlier, and he did all his scene with, you know, George Wallace doing the speech and looking at him. And then the whole thing, again, had to be manipulated so that all the new footage, which was shot in color, was all turned black and white, grainy, scratches all had to run through exactly when the scratches ran through the real shot, and then the scenes are all handheld anyway, just doing this. So all of that has to be carefully, one frame at a time, plotted so the figure's put here in this frame, next frame the camera's over here, you got to put them over here, and it's got to look like it's all locked in beautifully.
Here by videotape is the encounter by General Graham, commander of the National Guard, and Governor Wallace.
Because these National Guardsmen who are here today as federal soldiers are Alabamians, and they live within our borders, and they are our brothers. We are winning in this fight because we are awakening the American people to the dangers that we have spoken about so many times, which is so evident today, the trend toward military dictatorship in this country.
Well, the Vietnam sequence has an awful lot of material going on in it. The opening scene to the Vietnam section, we basically, Tom lands with Bubba. They come off the helicopter, And we follow them up and around, and there's this is like the classic Bob scene, where you're fed a lot of information and get a real sense of where you're at quickly. And he gives you, what Bob's great about is, I don't know how he can do it, he choreographs a scene where he just feeds you these little pieces just right when he wants you to have them. And he's a master at that.
Right. All right, so yeah, all right, you're showing him. Let's do that. Come on out here. Now bring this act out here. Right, and move this whole thing out here. And the rest of you guys are going to be sitting around motivating these guys.
So we come around, and these helicopters go blasting in the background. So essentially, we had, I believe, 2 or 3, the most foreground helicopters came through on that to give our camera guy the move that he needed. Then, at the same time, while they were shooting that, I had a camera that's behind, I don't know what it is, a bunker or something that's in the shot, and I'm down there with my camera, we had some other cameras, and we're shooting telephoto shots of the helicopters flying and getting different pieces of real helicopters. Then we took all of that stuff later and composited them into the shot and animated them flying through, but they're not 3D CG elements, they're real helicopters. What I think is kind of a cool beginning to this scene is we're following Tom. He was talking about all the different rain you go through in Vietnam. We come around with Tom, and it's really dark, but it wasn't dark, it was bright sun. So we made it look dark and moodier. Comes around, the rain stops, and the sun comes out. Well, we caused the sun to come out, got rid of the rain, and then that's when the tracer fire starts, because there's one brief animation where the guy in the foreground gets hit, and all hell breaks loose. We got this tracer bullet material, and basically we were shooting it at the camera to see what it looked like. See if we could even use it, the real thing. Well, we couldn't use the real thing because it went by so quick, but it gave us a sense of the feel of it and the reality of it. That was all animated in, basically, into the shots looking at the jungle, and all the stuff's flying right by your face. It's hitting, there were bullet hits on plants and things that we would line up to, so it would hit just at that moment. Boom, 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 ripping stuff apart. There's a couple of guys on a large gun that get blasted away while Gary's yelling orders to everybody, trying to get everyone to do their job. And what we did is we shot our actors on this thing blasting away, and they were wired from the back. So at a certain cue, they were jerked out of the shot. We started off by shooting a fireball element or two, some explosions, I think, at different speeds. Just this pyro blowing up, and I think we might have had wind kicking it up a little bit. We shot, I mean, unfortunately, we didn't have quite the right materials, but we set in these pretty lame-looking dummies that we had, and also pulled them out with wires, and basically when we pulled them out, just pieces flew in the air. Then, using that, we started layering in what happens to these guys. And this is essentially what split screens have come now, which is a very complicated version of what split screens were 30 years ago, which is, as the guys are shooting and they start to get pulled away, well, we start to paint in using the Inferno, basically, a high-speed compositing system, and we started bringing in the fireball effect. Well, as that comes in, you start manipulating the guys as they fly back, how much of the flame is covering them up. So you start painting some of that flame in front of them. You start using some of the dummy material where they start to come apart. So it's just a subtle moment where things are starting to move in ways they shouldn't move on human bodies. And then the flame takes over the whole thing. And it's also the quality of the characters. Even though it's like that, it really has a resonance to the audience because they can feel that quick moment where you can see these screaming faces just getting covered in this flame. And it's horrifying. And then you're into this insanity. Well, that builds to the thing where there's this whole scene where they're running away, they're blasting out of there, guys are getting hit everywhere. Tom realizes he's got to go back and get Bubba.
Don't you stay here, goddammit! That's an order! I gotta find Bubba!
So he runs back. They know that Dan's calling in this napalm hit, essentially. So that scene is Tom racing towards us, carrying Bubba. Essentially, we shot a stunt guy carrying another stunt guy as Bubba, running at us from the distance. Runs a little so far and hits like a dip in the road and kind of bobs down, gets back up. At that point, we do a morph to Tom lifting up Michael T. except he's on this huge wire rig on this crane, essentially, because he can't carry Michael T. So Tom's running at us, and we're painting out all the wires on that, and that's who Tom's carrying. Shoot that element. The effects guys go in, Alan Hall and his group, rig all these giant tubes of pyro material, basically in gasoline, running up towards us. And all the cameras are running, going like crazy. There it goes. We're shooting a bunch of different speeds. And here we go. Boom, boom, boom. It's coming at us. Wham, wham, wham. And the final hit, wham! It's huge. Big burning shot. It's great.
So to set this shot up, we started with a rough composite. We just sort of block in the actors in front of the pyro footage just to work out the timing of the frames. We had the first section with the stuntman. The second half we dissolved to have Tom running, and just to figure out where the original framing was going to be and where our morph transition between the stuntman and Tom Hanks was going to happen. Then up to this point, we had just been working out the timing of all the starting point of the elements in the shot. So now we had to actually rotoscope out Tom and Bubba from the scene here, and that includes all these little bushes and leaves that overlap their legs.
The jets that come flying in are all CG, 3D CG jets, and dropping the napalm, canisters is also animated in CG. And then that was back time to when they really impacted behind them.
So this is what the final composite looks like. We're bringing all the elements. We had 3 F4s. They're dropping canisters that land timed to the pyro explosion. We have our guys running our stuntman, who then transitions to Tom Hanks right there. And these guys are running. They're matted in. We're painting out the old leaves in front of the new ones there. In the end, it all looks like it all happened at the same time.
Which looks pretty cool. And it's a great shot. Another scene that was lost is Forrest goes to China, because we had that one scene in there in China, and he's playing ping pong with elder George Bush, who then was the ambassador to China. And they're playing away, and Forrest, of course, is hitting it as hard as he can. And the last shot is Forrest hitting the ping pong ball so hard that it hits George Bush in the crotch, which is taken from some archival footage where it really happened. So it was too precious not to use in the movie.
There were a lot of difficulties that we had to address when taking this player out. One was when we put Tom in, he obviously had to sync with the ping pong ball as they hit back and forth. So we began by standing Tom in front of a blue screen here, as you can see here, and we suspended these little target marks for Tom to sync the position at which he should hit the ball. So this is just a crude composite, how we've taken the blue screen away and we've positioned Tom behind the table in the original archival footage. Now that we've removed the original player, we took Tom off of the blue screen and we inserted him behind the table in the correct position. We got to about this point in the process of this shot before it was actually cut from the film. But you could see that it was definitely starting to come together and was going to potentially be a very humorous shot.
The Johnson scene and the Nixon scene, and also in a different way, the Lennon scene is all the color footage. The problems were sort of similar in a way, except it was color. It just added one more layer of things we had to worry about to match to.
So we started working on the Lyndon Johnson footage. We had a whole different task because now we were working with old 16mm color footage, and there's a whole different look and feel to that. Some of the challenges were the same. We had old archival footage that we were going to position Tom into, and we're having to strip Tom in behind Lyndon's hands. And actually there was another military person in this position that we had to get rid of and then drop Tom in. In a shot like this wide view here, we decided to use a recreation where almost all of the set is actually a stage set that we shot. And then we're dropping in Johnson's head on top of a stand-in body look-alike. And what we did is we would start with the Johnson footage, look at the lighting and everything that we needed to match to, and make the rest of this scene come as close to that as possible so that our work was really just in isolating the head, dropping it on the neck, and tracking it in there. This shot, which is one of the embarrassing moments for Lyndon Johnson when Tom Hanks is sort of bending over showing him his wounds, we did the recreation approach to this as before, where we reshot the whole scene with our actors and are tracking Lyndon Johnson's head. Now, one of the problems is you can see that he continues to walk out of the scene, and we had to find appropriate footage of Johnson that was moving in some way that we could track that, and then we actually stabilized Johnson's head so that it wasn't moving, and then matched it to the other footage.
And essentially just give the whole sequence a continuity. It looked like we had pulled the whole documentary footage from someplace and you were just watching it for the first time.
I understand you were wounded. Where were you hit?
In the buttocks, sir.
Oh, that must be a sight. I'd kind of like to see that. God damn, son.
The Washington, D.C. crowd scene, this had to be a very organized shoot because we only had, I think, 2 days to shoot the whole sequence in. The one big camera had to follow Tom up as he comes up the steps. We follow him over, turn around, and reveal this ocean of humanity doing this huge cheer as he's like sitting there staring at it. So the process was to set the camera up the day before and rehearse with Tom or stand-in, just getting the move down, the basic positions down, because the crowd has been designed by me to be in the foreground, and then through a series of shots during the rest of the day when we get the main shot done, I'm going to move the crowd from this point to this quadrant, 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 and try to fill up that space all along the reflecting pool, which is huge.
In the original background, we really just had Tom, the people on the stage, and the people just in the immediate foreground here. Then in the computer, we had to replicate these people along the sides of the reflecting pool. And what we did is we would shoot multiple passes of these people in different positions. So you can see here, this was the original background. Then we would take a group of these people, shift them over here, do exactly the same camera motion, without Tom, without the people on the stage, and then we would combine that pass with just the people over here with the original background with Tom until we're able to fill them in along the sides here. And you can also note that the reflecting pool doesn't feel like reflecting that day. So in the final shot, as you can see here, we put a little reflection just to sweeten up the look of the shot, as well as put in a whole new sky.
Come on, get you, come on, get up there, come on, move, let's go.
Go, you can do it, just get up there, go on, that's it.
Tell us a little bit about the war, man.
War in Vietnam?
War in Viet-fucking-Nam!
The football stadium was actually shot here in LA. I think it was the University of East LA, something like that. A very smallish football field. Went there, basically what we did is, again, sort of like the crowd scene in Washington, D.C., but a little more elaborate, because we had to, with matte paintings, digitally paint in the rest of the stadium so it looked like it was a different location altogether.
This was one of the many crowd replication shots that we had to do through the movie. In this case, we had a stadium that was filled with maybe a couple hundred extras off in the distance, and they were holding up cards saying, "Go Forrest, go Forrest," and then we had to populate the surrounding area with thousands of people. And in fact, the original stadium only had a lower tier to it, and we added an additional upper level just to add to the overall scale, scope of the stadium.
There's a couple of very complicated but very cool shots in there you'd never know were effect shots. The ones on the ground where we're like with a steady cam following Tom running towards us with the football, and there's a couple of scenes there where the background is completely artificial. When he's running in, he gets the ball and he races into the tunnel and he just leaves the football field, and we're coming in and it goes into slow motion. Everything in the background out that tunnel is all put in. All the crowd, the stadium, everything is a matte painting. The ping pong game was shot at Paramount Studios. There was only, I think, one tier of people put in, basically. Everything above that was all painted in and designed beautifully, so it looked like this thing went on forever. It's like, because we're in China, so it's supposed to be like these stadiums hold 100,000 people. So it just goes into the dark, basically. You just see waves of people going up. Those were all painted in for the most part. And then again, given a little bit of noise, essentially, to give it kind of a sense of movement in there.
I was so good that some years later, the Army decided that I should be on the All-America ping pong team. We were the first Americans to visit the land of China in like a million years or something like that. Somebody said world peace was in our hands. But all I did was play ping pong.
A very lyrical moment, which is very beautiful, is when Tom and Jenny and little Forrest are walking towards the Bluff Plantation House, or the Gump House. And what we did is we shot the three of them as they walked away from cameras. So we came back weeks later in a place, because we had really marked the camera position and all the information quite thoroughly. We spent the day shooting this elaborate time-lapse shot where the shadows move across the real location. Then there's moments that aren't that complicated, basically looking into the lake as he's running by it. And it's a beautiful moment in the film. We essentially took the sky and just created a perfect reflection of the mountain and everything in this lake.
Like that mountain lake, Jenny, it looked like there were two skies, one on top of the other.
The cornfield shot where young Jenny and Forrest run out there getting away from the, I think the stepdad, where she says she wants to be a bird and fly far, far away. Well, we're on the two kids inside the cornfield, and when we come back up, we're revealing this whole cornfield and distant, buildings and stuff, and these birds fly out and take off. Real sense of freedom to it, and all the birds are all computer graphic birds put in and all animated to look like they're flying out of the cornfield.
They originally set this shot up with the children sitting in the cornfield, and they had this big camera move craning up. And they tried to release these doves off on cue. However, the doves kept flying off in the complete opposite direction or not flying off at all. For the sake of time, they asked us to create these computer-generated birds that would fly off at the perfect timing and in the perfect direction.
And there's a whole sky put back. And there's a lot of sky replacement in this show to help create the kind of atmosphere Bob wanted at that moment.
Dear God, make me a bird so I can fly far.
Mama always said that God is mysterious. He didn't turn Jenny into a bird that day. Instead, he had the police say Jenny didn't have to stay in that house no more.
The Dick Cavett show was a little different because it was taken from television material, which was John Lennon on the Dick Cavett show. And so we basically got that footage, watched it. The set was duplicated to look just like the old Dick Cavett set. Each shot has a slightly different blend in it. Dick Cavett was really there, made up to look like a younger Dick Cavett as he did on that show, at that particular one with John Lennon. Now, in some cases, because the sets were so similar, we were able to use a part of the real set split in with a section of the set from the TV show, and that's how close we were able to, line all those things up. So they weren't like rotoing John out of every single scene and then putting him into strictly just the live action plate in the background. And then again, his mouth was morphed.
No religion too?
Which was very difficult. John has a very unusual way of speaking, and his mouth shapes. I mean, it's very odd. When you start to scrutinize it, you realize there's some odd sort of things going on that are hard to duplicate, and it really makes a lot of difference in how his voice sounds if you don't get it right.
Here he is, Forrest Gump, right here. Gump, have a seat. Forrest Gump, John Lennon.
Welcome
You
home.
had quite a trip. Can you tell us what was China like?
In the land of China, people hardly got nothing at all.
No possessions?
And in China, they never go to church.
No religion, too?
Ah. Hard to imagine.
Well, it's easy if you try, Dick.
Some years later, that nice young man from England was on his way home to see his little boy and was signing some autographs for no particular reason at all. Somebody shot him.
The Nixon sequence was as hard as any of the sequences, which was very hard. Taking him and mouth morphing him essentially to be able to say the line that referred to the Watergate Hotel and putting Tom up into the hotel, and his guys would take care of it. He's also holding a plaque that he's going to give Forrest, which has Forrest's name on it, and we had to put the plaque face onto the one that Nixon was holding, which doesn't seem like anything, but it was such a lot of subtle bobbing and weaving and perspective changes, it was really painful matching that in.
Then we start out on the shot by replacing what was on the original plaque, tracking that in, pulling all the way back out to reveal Tom, getting rid of the original guy who was standing there receiving this award, and replaced all the shelf work, added the extra little bit of camera shake. The continuing challenge in all this archival footage is it was never shot with the intention of being used for effects work. It's a camera sitting on somebody's shoulder, the guy zooming in and out, which they tended to do a lot in news situations. It's shaking all over the place. It's 16 millimeters, so there's all this grain and stuff. And trying to make that fit into our new elements was just an incredible feat of not so much pushing new technologies as really pushing the limits of doing some things we knew how to do and doing them very, very well.
A few months later, they invited me and the ping pong team to visit the White House. So I went again, and I met the President of the United States again. Only this time, they didn't get us rooms in a real fancy hotel.
So are you enjoying yourself in our nation's capital, young man? Yes, sir. Well, where are you staying? It's called the Hotel Ebbot. Oh, no. I know of a much nicer hotel. It's brand new, very modern. I'll have my people take care of it for you.
You can sit here if you want. Well, are you going to sit down or aren't you? What's wrong with your legs?
Oh, nothing at all, thank you. My legs are just fine and dandy.
Then why do you have those shoes on?
My mama says my back's crooked like a question mark. These are going to keep me these are going to make me as straight as an arrow. They're my magic shoes.
Do you like my dress?
What?
It's my party dress.
What's a party?
Haven't you ever been to a party before? Are you stupid or something?
My mama says stupid is as stupid does.
I'm Jenny.
I'm Forrest Gump.
Cut. And action.
Forrest? Hi there.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
I brought you something.
Thank you.
I ate some. Mama sent me $10, and I'd like to spend it all on you.
Come on, come over here. Let's sit down and talk for a second. We're good friends, aren't we?
Oh, well, you're my most special friend.
And you're mine, too. And I love when you come to see me, and sometimes I wish you'd let me know when you're coming, because I have plans tonight.
Hey, Jenny.
Hi, David, this is Forrest.
Well, we could all spend Mama's $10.
I'm going out with David, just the two of us. I need you to understand, okay?
Well, since I won't be doing anything, I won't be needing Mama's money.
Listen, keep it. You keep it, and we'll do it another time, okay? All right, I'll hold on to it, okay?
Come on, Jenny, let's keep going.
All right. Please don't hate me.
I could never hate you.
Cut. Very nice.
Marker.
And action.
Hi, Forrest. Hi.
I ate some.
I'm so glad you're here. I want you to meet someone.
You're a mama, Jenny?
I'm a mama. His name's Forrest.
Oh, it's like me.
I named him after his daddy.
I mean, he has a daddy whose name is Forrest, too.
You're his daddy. Forrest, look at me. Look at me. Let me tell you something. Look. There's nothing you need to do, okay? You didn't do anything wrong. You gave me life. Isn't he beautiful?
It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
No, he's not. He's smart. He's one of the smartest in his class. Go see him. Go on, go talk to him.
Cut. And action.
Would you read that book to me?
Serious Simon reached over and tried to help himself, but
That's it?
instead of one balloon, the whole bunch broke loose. Up he
Higher.
sailed higher and higher. The houses looked like toy houses, and the people like dolls. What, Daddy?
Nothing. I think you read a book really good. Is that what I'm supposed to say? What am I supposed to say? Oh, that's right. No, I just wanted to tell you that I love you.
I love you too, Daddy.
Okay, then.
The sound of the people in the stadiums for the football games in Gump were a big project for us, too. We knew that we'd need to go out and make lots of little expeditions to record crowds, and so we went to football games, college football games, professional football games, etc., did lots of recordings, and most importantly, recorded the crowds, the football crowds, from lots of perspectives. We knew that we would need some recordings that sounded like you're hearing 50,000 people yelling at the same time. And so we couldn't stand right next to a few people because they're the main ones that we would hear. So we had to position microphones way up on the light stands at the top of the stadium so that the audience would sound like one giant mass with no individual people standing out. We also needed very close-up responses from people because there are shots, obviously, where we look like we're 5 or 6 feet from individuals. And so we recorded those both in stadium situations and as another part of the replacing of the dialogue, the ADR that we did.
Hi, I'm Ben Fontores. I'm a lifelong fan of music, and I've been really lucky to have 2 of the best jobs in the world. This is back in the 70s. I was an editor and writer at Rolling Stone magazine, and on weekends, a DJ at a free-form rock station playing whatever I wanted. At the magazine, I often wrote about movies, and I always appreciated how some films would be enhanced by a musical soundtrack, or even just a song, like Spike Lee's Crooklyn, or in Apocalypse Now, Francis Ford Coppola uses just a few, but they were so memorable.
Forrest, I told you not to bother this nice young man.
This film has a remarkable soundtrack and score. It's a combination of a traditional orchestral score and then a mini library of rock and roll history, 45 popular songs ranging from the late 50s into 1980, perfectly matched to the action and characters and storyline of Forrest Gump.
As I started working on the movie, I realized music was going to be a very big part of the film, because I felt that the music was historical signposts and they were musical icons for the audience.
And the music was just a great vehicle to take people back to that period.
I mean, you sort of know that all that couldn't have happened to one guy, right? But somehow they made you believe
that it did.
That it did. And this film, the music was an integral part.
This is art and cinema. The way the two things come together, the way the use of music and the story that's being told, it's one of the most artistic things I've seen come out of Hollywood in the last decade.
We had an opportunity to create a musical timeline that hadn't been done really for quite some time, since maybe American Graffiti, but we were covering 3 decades. Essentially, I created a library of material, records that I thought were great, and built a library of favorite artists and favorite cuts. We narrowed the music down to American artists, because we just knew we would have been overwhelmed by the entire British invasion. But it was an American story, and it was about American history and what was going on in America. I didn't know it at the time, but what happened was, in a very interesting way, Alan's music underscores very specifically the feelings of the characters, where the records underscore the feelings of the time. My criteria for songs were, first and foremost, what was emotionally correct for the scene, what was right for what the character was feeling, what I wanted the audience to feel. Also, it had to be correct for the period of time we were in. As if there was always a radio playing in the scene, what would be playing on that radio at that given time.
Well, soundtracks these days are different in that back about 25 or even 35 years ago, in the early 70s with American Graffiti, when that album came out with all those hit songs reflecting the beginning of rock and roll and the power of a DJ like Wolfman Jack, a person who was a rock fan could gather all of her or his favorite songs in one album. And the same thing happened again in the early 80s, 1983, for the Big Chill. I think it reminded the boomer generation of that time of Motown music and other great songs of that period. And with 45 songs from 1956 to 1980 on Forrest Gump, again, an audience had the chance to do that. In this feature, you'll learn more about the songs that were chosen for the movie and how they help to tell the story, the remarkable story of Forrest Gump.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Daly, Dean of the School of Cinematic Arts here at the University of Southern California. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to join us for a remarkable event. I'm at the moment sitting in the projection booth above Frank Sinatra Hall in the Eileen Norris Theater Complex, where, along with hundreds of our students, I have just had the pleasure of seeing once again Forrest Gump. Tonight, we are going to have a unique opportunity to discuss with the very collaborators who created this film how it came into being. Tom Hanks, Gary Sinise, and the screenwriter, Eric Roth, will join Robert Zemeckis, the director, in sharing their memories of the creation of Forrest Gump with all of us. It's always very special for us here at USC to have Bob Zemeckis back on campus. Not only is he one of our most famous alumni, but he also teaches here on a rather regular basis, introducing students to the newest techniques for making motion pictures. Bob Zemeckis was here at USC during the 1970s, along with people like John Carpenter, Robert Elswit, the great cinematographer, Ben Burt, the sound designer, and just as other generations before them, they all worked together to create their student films that would eventually lead them into their careers. Bob's student film, The Lift, is still shown today to incoming students as the perfect example of a short film. One of the things Bob has said many times is that when he first came here, they put an 8mm camera in his hand, and from then on, he thought filmically. About 6 years ago, he helped us to create the Robert Zemeckis Center for Digital Arts, a wonderful facility where students can explore the very latest techniques that Bob has helped to pioneer in the creation of motion pictures. So I think we're all in for an exciting evening. I'll be moderating the panel, and I hope you are looking forward to what these folks have to say as much as I am. Welcome our guest, please.
What do you want us to say?
Well, future Bob Zemeckis is out there.
Okay. Okay, so let's get started so that we have lots of time for questions. The first thing I thought we might talk about is what it means to adapt a novel like this. So, Eric, I guess that's kind of a question for you and Bob about, finding it, the process of adapting it, how much you worked with the author of the novel.
Actually, some other screenwriters had taken a crack at it and had not failed, but had not succeeded in the sense that, and so Warner Brothers was willing to, they put in a turnaround actually to Paramount, whereas Tom and I went together, and we had met on a wonderful movie called The Postman that you may remember.
Written by Eric Roth.
Yeah, which had won me a Razzie at one point. In any case, Tom and I went in to sell it to, rest his soul, Brandon Tartikoff, who was at the head of Paramount at the time. And Tom, if you remember, actually acted out a bunch of stuff that we talked about. Because I remember saying he was sitting on a bench, there's a feather, and Tom played various sort of parts of it in character.
Wendy Feineman was there.
And Wendy Feineman, I'm leaving out, you're right, the producer who had the novel at that point. And we then went searching for a director when Paramount agreed to do it. And we were lucky enough to land in Bob Zemeckis' lap, or blessed, I guess you'd say.
I understand that there's some newly admitted graduate students that are here tonight. So I just want to say welcome. Welcome. If you're serious about movie making, you're in the right place. I never read the novel, ever, to this day. That's the truth. It was Eric's screenplay that was my inspiration, and from what I gathered, bits and pieces, I think the glue, the thing that Eric saw in this novel was the love story between Forrest and Jenny, And he sort of saw that and was able to pull that out and make that the spine for this movie.
If I could just interject for 1 second, just to say how Bob, the script, I think I write too much probably in most of the movies I write. And Bob really, as a writer himself, I mean, felt certain things were just excesses and had the, you know, sort of the overview of it. And just to let you know, just as sort of a little thing was, Lieutenant Dan had over his head in the first draft a black cloud, which then went away. And Jenny had angel wings. Now, they may have been the worst ideas ever, but Bob felt this is a bit much.
And Forrest always had Curious George as a cartoon monkey talking to him. Exactly. And I always think, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I always had the feeling that because I did Roger Rabbit, that's how come they sent me the script, because they said, get the guy who can do the cartoons and the humans together. And the first thing I said was, I'll do this, but all this cartoon stuff has to go.
And you know, the other part was that after Bob had read it and said he was interested in doing it, he said, now we got to go to work, which is what we did, you know, and which happens with any good director. And you start from page one, and some months, or it could be a year later, you might get lucky and get a movie.
Yeah.
So, Tom, I have to ask you, and Bob too, I mean, bringing Forrest to life, you know, were there specific things that you did? Did you rehearse? Did you improvise? Were there techniques that you're willing to share, or perhaps not share?
Well, I think the biggest thing, by the way, we just came from dinner where we laughed our heads off. So it's odd for us to come here and feel like we're IBM executives giving a seminar on new RAM DOS technologies. But nonetheless, we were flying by the seat of our pants. I certainly felt as though we were. There were some wardrobe tests and the usual things. We did screen tests with Robin, who was pregnant at the time. We did the screen tests. So we were shooting her from above, and I had no real character, and I was always afraid that Bob was going to look at the screen tests for Jenny and for a young Forrest and then fire me because obviously I had no idea what I'm doing. But when we talked about Forrest's voice, his accent, his cadence, and we could have slapped something together. I mean, as an actor, I was prepared to say, "What do you want, Bob?" But we ended up casting Michael Humphreys, who, by the way, is now serving in Iraq. He is now in the military, serving in Iraq. He was, how old was he, Bob? 8, 9?
Something like that.
7 or 8. He was a little kid, and Bob was, how are you going to do this? And I don't know who it was. One of us said, well, we have this kid. Rather than make him, I think that was what we got together and said, you got to talk to this kid, Tom. Make sure that he does what you want him to do. And I realized that was going to be impossible. I said, well, rather than do that, why don't I do what he does? So you get a natural kid being himself. And Michael talked the way, when he was 8 or 9, he talked the way Forrest talks as an adult.
And he was really godsend, too, because I remember you always saying, I just don't want to, do a Southern accent. I just don't want to just do that.
I did that on other films. But.
And you're right, yeah. Right. But I mean, no, I remember you saying that. But when he came along, it was like, okay, now we have something to work with.
I had a tape recorder, and we took Michael around. Actually, we took young Michael Humphreys out to the Gump house in South Carolina for the first time, and I was talking to him. I said, so what does your dad do, Michael? He said, well, my daddy makes grease. I said, what do you mean he makes grease? Well, he works in a factory and makes grease. I said, well, what do you have to use grease for? Oh, there's all kinds of uses for grease. It goes in, they use it in oils, and they use it in lubricants, and they put it in lipsticks. So it's like...
Well, think about how powerful You know, I wish I could get hypnotized and, you know, and get any memory of making a movie erased and I can see the movie. But it's got to be really powerful to have seen Tom doing Forrest with that accent, you know, in the first couple minutes of the movie, and then there's little Forrest on the bus, and he opens his mouth and speaks exactly the same way. I mean, I think, you know, subconsciously there's like a thing that just clicks there, and it all just works and makes that whole thing work.
That was the, you know, then after that, it was just one damn thing after the other, you know. It was just like trying to...
Well, you know, you look at the film and you say, okay, you know, anyone looking at the film from a critical point of view says, it's comedy, it's absurdity, it's tragedy, it's satire, it's horror, it's fable. I mean, and it all came together.
It's a Bob Zemeckis film.
Right. So, you know, I think what probably intrigues a lot of audiences is, do you know when you're making it this is what's going to happen? Do you know how it's going to come together? Is it post? When do you realize that you have this incredible balance?
I never do. I never do. I mean, all I can do is just try to get through the day. And I ask the crew that all the time, too. I ask my crew, I say, now, do you guys know when you're making these movies if they're going to be good or if they're not going to be good? And they go, no, we never do. Never do.
Well, there were huge questions is really what was going to happen in the movie 2 weeks before we started shooting. Bob's process here is to get everybody in a room. It's like boiler room sales or something like that. It's like hothouse plants. You sit in this room with bad food in some production office somewhere in America, and Bob sits there and says, now, here's why we got to do this, is because on the day when the sun is going down and we're paying generator rentals and everybody's in their makeup and hair and the crew's getting paid, we can't have any arguments or discussions about what the scene is about. So that's it. So Bob gets us all together for quote-unquote rehearsals, and sometimes, up to that point, rehearsals have sometimes been, you know, a set has been taped out on the floor, and it's not a phone, it's a block of wood that you pretend is a phone and stuff like that. But Bob brought us all together, every cast member, and Eric was there as well. So it was us, Sally, Michael T., Robin, anybody who had, I don't know, I guess that was kind of like the main cast, right. And Eric, and for 2 weeks, we started at the first page and we talked about every scene. We could talk about each other's characters, lines we liked, lines we didn't like, scenes we were in, scenes we were not in. And we worked our way through to the end of the movie. And then we went back to page 1 and we did it all over again. And that's what we did for 2 weeks. And huge things were actually come up with and changed in the course of that rehearsal, including the entire take of Forrest and Bubba in basic training, in boot camp.
Right.
Because Eric had written it, it was kind of like, we did everything wrong but right. We were like, you know, buck privates. What, we're gonna go there do buck privates, Eric? We're gonna run around like Abbott and Costello, me and Bubba? And Bob would say, well, how would you go through buck? What would Forrest do? But that was the give and take of everything that went on, and based on those discussions, we would be having the same discussion right up to the day that we would shoot an individual scene, either in South Carolina or back here in LA.
I would say that the thing that's the thing that's unique about this movie than any other movie I made, and it started in that rehearsal period, because one of the things when I'm in that rehearsal, one of the things I always say is, I just want to make sure we're all making the same movie. Right? I just want to make sure that we're all making the same movie. And in this movie, absolutely everybody who was involved in it, from the cast, you know, to, you know, Eric and all the above-the-line producers, and every single person on this crew, everybody was inspired on this movie. It's like everybody knew exactly what every small prop had to look like, every piece of wardrobe had to look like. It was just one of those miraculous situations where I never had to go to anybody and say, you know, what movie are you making? You know, I mean, this is, you know, so that was very unique about this one.
Was there anything particular that got dramatically changed in post that was deleted or taken out, or something that you felt might kind of change the course of things that you did in post?
No, it was just, no, it was a, you know, it was a very solid screenplay. It wasn't one of those situations where we'll put a scene from the beginning to the end. It was just literally, you know, tightening things up. I mean, we had a scene where Forrest was on the bridge with Martin Luther King that didn't make it into the final movie. We had, we talked about what were some other ones? I can't remember.
I think
talked about them today.
That sequence.
What's that?
It's mostly that sequence because.
Oh, we talked about the one in Vietnam.
Oh yeah, when we had a scene where Jenny actually, it's implied that she kills her father as a little girl. We took that out. So
that wasn't implied.
Yeah,
we had to run over the guy with a tractor.
Well, but the way I shot it is, he was in the field, and there was this weed harvester, and he was in the field pulling this rock out of the ground, and she was staring at the gear shift lever. And then the next thing you knew, the thing was moving. So you never actually saw her pushing the lever forward.
She was like one of the children of the dam. You know, the lever goes chunk chunk and then off, you know, kills her father. That was the stuff we shot. The stuff that you dreamed up on was like, insane.
Oh yeah.
How many times were we screaming, Bob, you can't show that in a movie, you know?
So could this film get made today? Do you think the business has changed enough that it would be hard to pitch this film today?
I mean, it's a miracle that the film got made back then, 15 years ago. I mean, it was one of those. I mean, I'll be perfect. I think I'm going to be perfectly honest here. Film school. I mean, the movie got made because Tom wanted to make it and I wanted to make it, and believe me, history, is going to sound very different now, but the executives at the time, they didn't know what this was. I mean, they were going like, oh my God, there's like, they were not, they didn't see this as a viable movie, let alone as, I mean, I'll tell you how much, we didn't even have a crew t-shirt on this movie. Not even, we weren't even given the money in the budget to make a crew t-shirt because.
That's how little faith the studio had.
That's right. That's right. So, the long-winded way of saying absolutely not, you couldn't make this movie today. I don't think so. I think it would be really, 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 really hard.
Do you agree, you guys? Gary, you think you could make it today?
I couldn't make it today. I mean, Bob might. I don't know. It probably cost 3 times as much. That's for sure, right?
Yeah, at least. Yeah, probably.
I think the problem would be is how I'm not sure they could figure out how to market it, which is where they begin. So that would become a problem, I think.
Looking at each of the films you've done, just to leave Forrest Gump for a moment, I mean, I think it's interesting, especially for this audience, what it is that attracts you about the particular technological challenge you take on in each film.
It kind of happens in the reverse. I actually get attracted to a screenplay based on the characters in the story, and then something happens. Something happens where then I have to start figuring out a way to, I don't know, spray that spectacle in there or something. I don't know what that is, and that's basically how it happens.
So, Forrest Gump became obviously much more than a character in a movie. I mean, it's become this iconic kind of figure. But at the time, it seemed like people like Newt Gingrich and Pat Buchanan all said, oh, great conservative hero. Now, I happen to know enough about you guys and your politics to know that this was probably not where you were headed. But how did you feel about what you intended? Was this a surprise to you, the reaction that it was seen as Hollywood going conservative?
I never got it. I mean, I really never understood it. Because we were saying that I think Bob has sort of a universal desire to poke a stick in everybody's eye. That he has a jaundiced point of view, or at least did, about all sorts of things. So that some people, as I was saying, my politics are more left wing, and I don't. Bob felt that they're fair game too. The Black Panthers, and I mean, you've seen the Vietnam March.
Well, here's my theory, and it's only a theory. My theory is that
Not at this school, it's only a theory, Bob.
Right, no.
At this school, it's
only a theory.
gospel according to Bob Zemeckis.
Yeah, my theory is this. My theory is that the Newt Gingrich people of the country have this incredible noise-making machine. They just love to hate movies, right? And so they make a lot of noise about how movies are destroying the social fabric of our culture and our youth. So when a movie comes along that they like, they got this noisy machine, right? And that just like creates this thing which isn't really, anything. But I did get summoned to, the movie came out in July, and I got summoned to to meet all the editors of the Wall Street Journal in August, because they wanted to know what was going on here. That was their question. They sat me down, gave me lunch, and said, what's going on? What's with this movie? Is this a change? What's going on? I said, I don't think so, But anyway, who knows?
Well, it actually comes into the Republican philosophy of getting things done. Rather than give money to, say, special education programs for disabled students, it's better just to ask their mothers to sleep with the principal of the school they want them to get into. Which is much more in tune to the American can-do spirit.
Right.
What do you think? Right. Lieutenant Dan, he's proud of me.
So on that note, Gary, right after Forrest Gump came out, I was here on campus talking to someone in another department, and I said something about your performance, and they were saying how wonderful it was, after which I said, and the effects really worked, and they said, what effects? And so we said, did it ever dawn on you that he has legs? But I would love to have you share a little with us about what it meant to try to do that performance, because it's completely remarkable the way in which you handle your body.
It's funny how people have asked me that before and thought it was so convincing, but they forget that I'm in my underpants when I walk out on, the first time you see them, I'm in boxer shorts, my legs are hanging out there, I'm walking around, I'm on my way to the John. And people forget that part of it because the effects of removing the legs were so convincing that he must be a double amputee. I remember when Bob called me on the phone and said, I know how we're gonna do the legs.
Everybody does you.
Everybody does. I know.
Everybody does, Bob.
Yeah.
We're gonna take them off in the computer. And I said, great.
Did you work with a physical therapist? Did you work with someone to help you? Because, what I think is so convincing is the way in which you handle your upper body, when clearly we know you were using your legs, but at the same time, it's an amazing piece of physical performance.
We had a Ricky Jay, the magician. Remember, Bob got Ricky Jay to come over and design this special wheelchair that I could actually sit on my legs and tuck this part of my legs down into this chair, and you would actually look at the chair, and it wouldn't, they've done that before, but I remember Bob said, we don't want your legs down in a box underneath the chair. So he designed this wheelchair. They designed a wheelchair that actually the seat just bent back a little bit like this, and it had this little platform on it right in the middle, and I could tuck my legs right in, and you could look at the chair, and the illusion was that, it was a perfectly legitimate wheelchair and wear with the legs. And then we designed these, the pants, Joanna designed these, fatigue pants that would wrap around, my leg had to be bent like this, so they would wrap these pants around my leg. And I would tuck them in, and I could sit in the chair for maybe 10 minutes, and then I'd have to stand up and shake out a little bit. And then, of course, the computer effects were great, and I just had to try to move around as if I had no legs. And they did a remarkable job putting the shadows in and all the things that they did animated with the animation. It was great.
If we can turn for just one moment, Eric, back to you for the Curious Case of Benjamin Button obviously relies on some very, very sophisticated effects that couldn't have been done when this film was made. And I just wonder, I think it's really a question to all of you, do the ability that we have now with effects to create this kind of magic, do you feel as artists, as performers, as directors, writers, a greater sense of freedom that you're not as limited by the physical production?
As a writer, I never felt I was limited. I mean, it was probably naivete, but if I wrote World War I broke out, World War I would break out if it was deemed to be necessary, you know, and so that I always assumed that there was a Bob Zemeckis around who could figure out how to do it. And probably certain movies haven't gotten made or because they haven't figured out how to do certain things yet.
Anybody else have any thoughts about?
Well, I think you can literally make anything now. Stan Freberg used to talk about the superiority of radio over film, because on radio, you could drain Lake Michigan and fill it with marshmallows for absolutely no cost whatsoever. Now you can drain Lake Michigan and fill it with marshmallows inside a computer, and it's expensive, but nonetheless, you've drained Lake Michigan and you've filled it with marshmallows. Whether or not draining Lake Michigan and filling it with marshmallows is really germane to the story, however, that is the point that still remains to be proven. And just because you can do anything on film now doesn't mean that you should.
I think it's a tremendous burden on you, you newly admitted grad students out there. Here's what I'm noticing. What I'm noticing is that the expectation is that the images that you guys produce are expected now to be absolutely perfect. There's no excuse for it not to be perfect. That's a big burden. You know, Forrest Gump, you know, we made this movie 16 years ago, and those effects of, you know, Forrest with Kennedy, those were jaw droppers back then. They're a shrug now. You see this on every TV commercial. I mean, this is like, you know, old school. You know, it's really interesting. What's going to happen is, I don't think spectacle you know, because it is all perfect and it's as magnificent as anyone can imagine it. It isn't gonna be a reason to see a movie anymore. So what's actually going to happen is it's the power of the story. Unfortunately, there isn't going to be any margin for error when it comes to putting your images up there. I mean, you're all going to be expected to have, you know, paint boxes on, you know, every frame that you generate's gonna, you know, you can't have any mic shadows, you can't have any, you know, if an actress's hair is flyaway, got to paint it out. You know, that's going to be the expectation.
In that vein, Gary, just one last question before we open it up to you. You've done work for television, obviously. We all enjoy your performances regularly. You've done a lot of work on stage, and you've obviously done a lot of work for the big screen. Do you have a preference to one medium over the others, or are there particular challenges to one over the other that you might want to share with this audience?
What? You know, the commonality is always just trying to be truthful, no matter if you're on stage or on television or in the movies or wherever. You're just trying to be believable and make the performance right. And the mechanics might be a little bit different on film versus stage or television. Right now, I'm playing the same part for 5 years now. I thought that was, you know, I knew that was going to be a challenge to tough it out, playing the same character now for this long, because I was always an actor who was going from thing to thing. But now I've settled into the role, and there's you know, it's interesting to be able to play somebody over this long period of time and try to change things up and to, you know, mix things up with the writers and evolve the character over a long period of time. I enjoy all the mediums you know, as long as I'm a working guy, that's what I care about.
Okay. All right, we're going to open this up. I think, as Alex mentioned to you earlier, we have a mic right over here. So if you want to ask a question, if you could come and line up over at the mic. And once...
Are you a junior college transfer, sir, to the...
Okay.
Just out of high school, are you, young man?
I'm 91.
Julian is our oldest alum, I think, that we have here at the moment. So welcome. It's lovely to have you.
In many ways, I hope. If we had just seen what we just saw in the newest 3D form, would we have found anything more in it? Would it have been more rewarding?
I can answer that question. Not all movies should be made in 3D. What's happening out there now is because we have perfected the 3D format, everyone thinks that all movies are going to be 3D. I don't think Forrest Gump should have been made in 3D. I think it should have been made exactly the way it is. I think you have to have a story that lends itself to 3D, and then that will add spectacle to that particular story. But all movies shouldn't be made in 3D, just like all movies shouldn't be made in widescreen. I mean, 3D is like a presentation format.
There's a question for the actors as well as the director. I'm just wondering what in the nature of the relationship between actor and director is most useful, helpful to you to facilitate a performance, to elicit the correct emotional tone? Is it come from the writing? Does it come from your interaction with the director? What's most helpful to you as an actor?
I think one of the things is just being open to listen to what the actor has to say. That's always helpful. Bob was always very open to me. I was constantly bringing in thoughts about the disability of Lieutenant Dan and what would actually happen if you lost your legs in battle and that kind of thing. In fact, one time I called Bob up and Eric, and there was originally a scene where Lieutenant Dan came right out of the hospital and went to a bar or something, and pretty soon after he had lost his legs, and I called Bob and suggested that scene be actually cut and rework, maybe some of the stuff be taken and put in another scene. Bob was always very open to that, open to hearing, because the actor's out there trying to figure out what he's going to do, trying to research the part, trying to, and if the director's open, that's always very, very helpful. Sometimes they're not, and that can be a problem. But Bob is not like that. He was very, very open to what we had to bring to it, and so was Eric. And one of the things I just want to comment on the moment that Tom was talking about when we were sitting, actually going through the script page by page by page. And one of the things, I don't know if you remember that, but at one point Bob goes, we get to this 1 second, and he goes, "Now wait a minute, what's the deal with this shrimp?" And if you remember that, we didn't quite know why Forrest gets sort of driven to go down and work on a shrimp boat. The stuff about Bubba was not actually in there where all Bubba talked about was shrimp. It wasn't in the, and so in those meetings, they came up with the idea to have Bubba have nothing else on his mind besides shrimp. And because Bubba had nothing else on his mind besides shrimp, that's all that Forrest Gump remembered was shrimp. And so he's driven to go fulfill that dream of Bubba's, and that came out of a meeting where it was spitballing, and a lot of ideas were coming out, and it ended up being, a pretty significant part of the storyline. Bob was very, very open, looking for a lot of ideas, and that's always terrific to work with a director like that.
Tom, how about?
Well, Bob, he's the director who comes by and says, "So what do you think? What do you think you do here?" As opposed to, okay, remember, you're looking up and you're scared. You feel you feel terror in your heart. It's about, you know, he doesn't do anything like that. And you see him, it's Kong. And you know, you want to scream, but you can't scream. You know, he doesn't do anything like that. He says, what do you, what do you think? And then you'll do something. You'll come and say, why'd you do that? There was 3 o'clock in the morning. Jenny tells Forrest that she won't marry him. And Forrest goes out onto the porch through the screen door and slams. And he did it. He does it. He goes out and he stands like this. And Bob says, why do you put your hands on your hips like that? I mean, it looks kind of goofy. Pretty serious scene, you know. And it's kind of like a silly pose. And I said, well, I saw Michael doing it on the set. And he was an 8-year-old kid standing around like this. And I just said, I thought that, you know, when Forrest has something on his mind, he just puts his hands in that very effeminate way on his hips and stands there. All right. So, you know, he's willing to let us do our job and not run onto this and say, no, no, no. Forrest can't stand like that. He must stand like this. I didn't do anything like that. So there you go.
I know you want to say something, Bob.
Well, it's all like a great. It's all when it's running on all cylinders. It's like a magnificent. It's a process. It's a stew. You know, everybody's working together. When these actors are going to the place where they go to do all this great emotional stuff that they do, I don't want to know where they go. It's none of my business. I don't want to go near it. You know, that's their process. That's what they do. It's my job just to sort of have my hand on the throttle, you know. I just sort of like think my job is to guide the actor as to where they are emotionally in the movie as a whole. You know, it's like at this point in time, this is what you're feeling at this point in time. But I do find, though, that when I say it's all a process and it all fits together, every time an actor ever comes up to me and says, why would I say this, right? It's always a problem with the script. I mean, always. You got a problem with the scene. Because, I mean, if you can't answer immediately and say, here's the reason. If an actor says, I don't understand why my character would say or do this, and you don't know immediately why, like the example that Tom just sort of, then you got to go and you got to look into the script and you got to say, what's wrong with this? How come you're confused?
Every movie I've done, the actors, if they come to me and say, why am I doing this? I have to go back and look at because there's something wrong with it. For them to have kind of the courage to come out of that trailer, to have to go play that emotion, whatever that part is, 100%.
And do you make sure, Bob, when you haven't written the script, that you bring the writer into all your rehearsals and make them available?
The writers are on 24-hour call, like an old-fashioned family doctor.
Okay, next question.
Hello, everyone. My question is about the music in the movie, because I equate a lot of the times that I hear the songs now with the movie. And I wonder if you went through the process of thinking about what songs to put into the movie or how that went about, because they really do resonate and it really makes sense.
The music is actually a very interesting character in the movie, and and we broke it down, and I actually have a really succinct answer to that question. First of all, we were deciding that we were going to have all these rock and pop tracks in the movie. We had to make a decision because there were so many. We said, well, let's start with American music because it's an American story. So there's no British invasion or British artists in the movie at all. So we limited ourselves to only American music. And the long conversations I had with Al Silvestri was how are we gonna blend the record tracks with the score. And it really shaped up very easy. The thing I kept saying to Alan is that the pop tracks, it should be as if there's a radio on in the room. you know, the soundtrack that was going on in the life of these people. So all the music is accurate for the era or for the year that you're in. And basically we divided it up like this, that the records were gonna play the landscape and the underscore was gonna play the emotion. And that's sort of where we started, and that's what we did.
What does the phrase "stupid is as stupid does" mean, and how did it evolve?
My mother used to say, handsome is as handsome does, which is an old expression, meaning if you do something sort of well and elegantly, that will be remembered that way, and I just perverted it. I mean, if you want, like, the box of chocolates, I said that, I had the line, and Bob said, because it's just life is by, Bob said, what the hell does that mean? And I said, you know, you never know what you're going to get, and that's the line you have. But you know, why these things resonate with people, I can't tell you. I think they're just because they seem common, and then they're somehow in the character's mind mean something to him. Stupid is as stupid does, I guess. I don't know. I think anybody recognizes doing something stupid. I don't know. I can't answer. I mean, it's just. What do you think it means, Tom? Anything?
I don't know, but Mama said, anytime people call you stupid, you just say back to them, well, stupid is as stupid does. All right, Mama. You're stupid. Stupid is, stupid does. That's what my mama said. He doesn't know what it means, but he knows he's supposed to say it, because Forrest always did what Mama said.
And so my question is, what do you do to make sure that your movies are so, you know, so technically, and the special effects are they stand up so well to time?
Boy, just work really hard, you know. I mean, there's no, I mean, it's, you know, you know, my agent used to joke that I was the best per hour rate for the studios in Hollywood, you know. He say, you're the best per hour rate for the studio for Hollywood. So all you can do is work hard. That's all you can do. And that's, you know, it just takes a lot of back-breaking work. That's all it is.
All right, I'm going to tell a story that we just told at dinner time. All right, you just saw the movie. You know, when Forrest is playing ping pong, and the soldier comes in and says, are you Forrest Gump? And I say, yes, sir. He says, you've just been awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. Okay, it was the last shot for the night. And there was a ping pong table, and everybody was there. And Bob said, well, how are we going to do this? I said, well, Bob, how about if I'm here playing ping pong? And then the guy comes in and says, you've just won the Congressional Medal of Honor. And Bob looked at me like I was from Mars, saying, well, hell, anybody can do that. You got to do something. And he's just sat there. And then he like leaped up. I got it. He said, what we're going to do is we're going to put the ping pong table up on its side, so Forrest is going to be playing by himself. We're going to put a little square in tape, and Forrest is just going to be hitting this ping pong ball back and forth, back and forth, back and forth into that same square. Tape is going to hit there every time. And I said, well, Bob, I can't hit the ping pong ball. Oh, no, we're going to do it with CGI. All right, let's shoot it. And then we shot it in like 6 minutes, and then we were done. But we had to go through Bob going. Because if we'd just done it the normal way, well, hell, anybody can do that. So he always tries to make movies that nobody else can do. And he pretty much succeeds, I'd say, Bob.
Good evening. My name is Jorge, and I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. I have a quick question. This is open to any of you. What life lessons did you guys take away from the character of Forrest Gump that you guys have applied to your life, if any?
You know, I really like Forrest's philosophy at the end of the movie when he's talking to Jenny's grave. And we went around and around on that a really long time because it wasn't the two-parter for a long time, and it was all about this feather blowing around on the breeze. I kept going to Erica, going, is life only just random? Is it just only random, or is there, you know? And so, so right at the 11th hour, we all cooked it up, and we, you know, and we, you know, and so we were just able to, you know, because I just felt like no one, not even Forrest, could have the, you know, the knowing, you know, of what
If you
it
can
is.
hear, I think, I don't remember the line exactly, but you can hear it in the dialogues. We weren't sure. I don't know, Jenny, if it's, you know, one way or another way, and that's how we felt, you know.
Right.
That's true.
That was at the 11th hour. We were literally having conversations in the second half of the day in my trailer, trying to figure out the actual cadence of the speech. And earlier the day, I had been in Vietnam with Lieutenant Dan. Fire in the hole, Gump. That was the last scene. Gump, see what's down inside that hole. That was the scene we shot right before. We moved locations, changed clothes, got out of the makeup, and went to the big tree and shot the scene at Jenny's.
And I
Jenny's grave.
remember writing it out, and it was way too long.
Oh, geez.
It was like forever, because I couldn't really articulate it as well as I would have liked to, you know, and maybe if I had more time, but, and then somehow they made it work.
Thank you very much.
Alex, are we running out of time here? Okay, one final question.
One final question with a 45-minute answer. We're not doing anything. We're not doing-
A lot of pressure. But anyway, I was just wondering for Bob and Gary and Tom, just could you talk a little bit about your process when something on set, when you're shooting, when a moment's not quite working? How do you work through that? Because, you know, just as an aspiring director, that happens a lot.
Can I answer for Tom?
Sure.
He just laughs his ass off.
What about for us who don't have actors like Tom?
What's that? I'm sorry?
Never mind.
Oh, okay.
There wasn't an actor who had the same kind of confidence.
Look, you know, everybody asks me, they say, oh man, you must have had such a good time making that movie, you know? And, you know, it was, you know, doing the work and working with these actors was really great, but it was a hard movie. It was really hard. And to me, it felt like something was going wrong every single minute. And, you know, making a movie is, for me, it's just survival, you know? Just get through the day with enough stuff that you can cut together. That's how it always feels, but that's just me. What about you guys?
It sort of like never really stops. When it's almost like filmmaking by attrition, because the only time you stop is when you run out of something. You run out of daylight, or you run out of film, or you run out of time, money. There are some days on this that were just a collection of the most breezy shots you can imagine. You know, okay, Tom, you're gonna go up and you're gonna go to the mailbox and you're gonna pull out a letter and you just gotta hold it up so we can get the camera over your arm. We see that it's an envelope from Apple Computer. All right, okay, all right. And you just do that, you bang that out and you go grab some other stuff. But then there were days in which everybody has lost their equilibrium, and we don't know if it's working right or not. We don't know what the punctuation mark is on the scene. And you end up sort of trusting a process that goes back to the very first moment that we started talking about it, you know, and every conversation ended up being important. Everything that you agreed upon, everything, more importantly, is what you eliminated, goes into shaping that day when you get there. I mean, you talk about the emotional power of certain scenes, and I'll tell you, like, when Forrest shows up at Jenny's apartment and meets his son for the first day, you know, that was a little bit of everything. It was kind of goofy, it was kind of silly, it was a couple of very emotional moments, but other than that, it's like camera moves and marks, and did we get it or not? I don't know.
And the crappiest little set that we built in a warehouse that was rain cover, right? Because, you know, it was literally in a...
The whole thing was fake.
The whole thing was like just, I mean, it was like, you know, it's a great scene.
Part of it is absolute, we know that it's the emotional core of the movie, and we sure hope that we're hitting the emotional core of the movie, but at the same time, we're able to ad-lib a line, because he says, what would Forrest think about when he first walks in here, Tom? I think he'd say, hey, you have air conditioning. And that wasn't, that wasn't in the thing. But first of all, it was so hot in South Carolina that day, but that was something. But that's what Forrest would say, because he, you know, that's a big deal to Forrest. Ooh, you live in a house with air conditioning. So you end up, I've heard this thing explained that is the state of all actors, in some ways filmmakers, and I think with Bob, it is at its most precise, is that actors have to be in this constant position of equipoise. The definition of equipoise is that state in which you are in a perfect balance between relaxation and concentration. It's equal to a center fielder at the crack of the bat. He has to be relaxed enough to know which direction to turn for the fly ball, but he also has to concentrate enough to be able to read a myriad of signals in a fraction of a second in order to be there. And this is what Bob, I think, demands of us, whether we're running through a jungle or we're in a fake snowstorm in downtown Los Angeles. You have to be in this position where you can go any direction emotionally that the scene and the moment and the beat ends up taking you.
And be able to, Tom, can you do all that, but then open yourself up to camera a little more?
Yeah.
Can you just twist your body a little bit more like this? Because that's what it ultimately always comes down to. And what's great about these really great, and when you have actors that go, yeah, I can make anything work, Bob. Don't worry about it.
You mean like this?
I can make it. You mean, I mean, and it's great, rather than, you know, them throwing up their hands and storming in their trailer because how do you expect me to, you know, to turn my body this way when I'm, you know, running through the jungle like this, you know?
Here's a great truth about acting in movies. Who out there is primarily an actor? Anybody? Okay. Oh, 2. Great. 4. Okay, fabulous. Good odds. More actors than directors in the this is the only time it'll happen to you in show business. Directors and writers will outnumber you. Oh, geez, I forgot what I was going to say now. Is that this is what it is, and you learn this on a Bob Zemeckis movie much sooner than you do anywhere else, is that it feels incredibly fake when you're shooting it, but it looks absolutely real on screen. So no matter what position you're in, what contortion you have to make, how fake you have to hold up, you know, the piece of paper so somebody can read it, it always looks artificial. When it feels artificial when you're doing it, but it is the real thing when you see it on film. And that's what separates the pros from the amateurs, is they can't understand that difference. And Gary and me, we're pros.
Whenever, that's right, and when Tom, whenever there was a problem, whenever I had to figure out a shot or I was struggling with a shot, Tom would say, Bob, I got the shot for you. Pow.
Pow, right here.
Right here, buddy.
Bring it in right here, baby. Right here.
There's the shot.
When in doubt, bang, right in here. And I have a one-word answer to all your editing problems. Intermission.
Well, I think it's a little after 10. We promised these folks that we would have them out of here by 10. I think this has been, you'll agree with me, a remarkable evening. And clearly a remarkable film that all of us, I think, set down 15 years after we saw it the first time. Some folks here are probably too young to have seen it 15 years ago, but those of us that weren't.
Think about that.
Jeez, how, yeah.
Jeez.
How old were you?
Is there anyone here who never saw this movie on the big screen before tonight?
Wow.
Look at
Wow,
that.
look at that.
Look at that.
That's unbelievable.
What were we, like your babysitter, you know? Mom and Dad are going out. You can watch Forrest Gump again. Angela will order pizza. But you need to go to bed when she tells you to.
So clearly the sign of a truly great movie, I think, is one that's still with us this long and provokes this kind of discussion. And we are enormously grateful to all of you for the incredible pleasure that this movie has given to so many, many people. And thank you very much for being with us.
Fight on!
Thank you. Thank you.